Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if God like Naruto says no to the council part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Hugging the edges of buildings and fleeting through the shadows, a small figure makes its way toward a gargantuan monument with 4 distinct faces carved onto it. Judging by the bursts of speed in between momentary pauses of caution, one would deem that the figure is in incredible urgency. Upon closer inspection, the small figure is revealed to be a young child, no more than 6 years of age. A young boy, evidently, possessing a mask of panic and dread. He glances over his shoulder, hearing the angry shouting of the villagers of Konoha, and quickens his pace. Kill the demon! Avenge our families! We must finish what the force started. He always hears their curses as he walks the streets. He constantly endures their angry glares and scathing looks. Yet, on this day, it is always worse. October 10th. The annual Konoha Village Festival that marks the day that the 4th Hokage defeated and killed the demon fox that assaulted the village 6 years ago and sacrificed his life to do it. Incidentally, this day also happens to be the young child's birthday. A taint of moonlight ripples down through ash-gray clouds, illuminating the boy's face in a pale and cold glow. He has soft features that accentuate innocence of youth yet, at the same time, are adorned with angular edges honed by emotional turmoil. His cheeks are faintly marked by thin lines resembling whiskers, nearly unnoticeable on his already fair complexion. Pale blonde hair that blends in with the moonlight in an eldritch fashion, wildly crowns his head. It is his eyes, however, that reign as his most prominent and memorable features. They are twin pools of sapphire that shine through his weak and sorrow-filled aura. They sparkle with a mischievous intelligence, and radiate that childish mirth found in all but the most depraved young. However, if one was to closely inspect those eyes, one would be alarmed to find a different shade of his eyes touching the edges of his irises. Hard glacial ice was slowly creeping over the eyes. Uzumaki Naruto. Orphaned and alone, he is hated and loathed for reasons unknown to him. He has spent the years of his very short life hiding and surviving in an environment of abuse and suffering. He knows only anger and hate and feels only sorrow and angst, leading him to adopt a persona of a cheerful and vibrant prankster, which, in truth, is but a mask to draw attention to himself and hide the crushing grief he is burdened with. Man, oh man, why didn't I listen to the old man, he says in regret. He recalls how his surrogate grandfather, the 3rd Hokage, had told him to come to the Hokage Tower first thing in the morning, where he would be spared from the villager wrath, and not to leave until the next day. Unfortunately, the characteristic impatience and quick settling of boredom in youth got the better of him, and he had left the safety of the Hokage's office to find some entertainment. Naruto could hear the shouts getting louder and louder, which could only mean that he is about to be caught and obtain a viscous beating. Again, he quickened his pace and arrived at a large tree growing into the side of the Hokage mountain. It was an impressive oak, the largest in the entire village. He never really came to this part of the village, so he didn't see it too often. He stood in awe of the majestic tree, momentarily forgetting his plight. He remembered the words the old man had spoken to him too long ago when they were walking through here. Flashback. Naruto was walking hand in hand with Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage. He was a wizened old man, possessing a vast wisdom obtained through years of hardships and struggles for the sake of his people and village. He took a puff from his pipe and let out a ring of smoke. His eyes crinkled as a smile spread across his face. "Ah, look Naruto, we have arrived at Haim-sama's garden," the old Hokage proclaimed merrily. "Haim-sama, where?" The bright-eyed blonde looked around expecting an actual person. "Right in front of you, my boy." "Huh?" the boy said quizzically while scratching his head. "Gigi, you're showing your age. There's no one in front of us. All I see is a giant tree." Sarutobi chuckled to himself. "That is Haim-sama Naruto. She has been with us since the beginning of the village and silently watched over us." Again, Naruto looked puzzled. "Why would you call a tree Haim?" he asked. Taking a long puff from his pipe, Sarutobi blew out a long line of smoke. "Well, you see, Naruto, Konohagakure was founded by 2 men, the 1st Hokage and his very best friend. As a token of friendship, Shodai-sama gave his friend a small plant which he planted right here to mark the foundation of our village. That's how Haim-sama came to be. She has been graced by the hands of both our founding fathers." "Wow! That's so cool," exclaims the boy excitedly. "Hey Gigi, were they strong?" Sarutobi began laughing loudly. "Were they strong? They were the absolute strongest. Entire armies fled before them, and it was said that together that they were invincible." "Wow! Did you ever meet them?" "Why, yes. I did, as a matter of fact. I met them when I was around your age. Truth be told, when they weren't busy running the village, they were often found right here. I saw them here on many an occasion." Flashback. And Naruto was brought out of his reverie by the angry curses that were coming from behind him. Not wanting to take his chances on running away, he decided to climb and hide in the foliage of the tree. Climbing higher and higher, he settled down at the top of the massive trunk where branches, thicker than the length of him, shot off skyward. Peering through the branches for his pursuers, Naruto felt something where he was sitting. Standing up, he ran his hands over where he was seated not a second ago and felt something. Upon closer inspection, He found that it was the Konoha symbol that all Konoha shinobi wear. Yet, the weird thing was that it wasn't carved into a tree, rather, it was growing out of the tree like the knots at the trunk. Suddenly Naruto froze. He could feel the villagers closing in on him. He didn't know how, but he could always feel people and their moods. It was strange, and he never told his Gigi in fear of being ostracized for being different. He did as he always did. He hid within himself. He went deep into his own mind and retreated from the world, making his presence as small as possible. He did it often when he was being chased or targeted. He did his best to be invisible and hide himself from aggressors. Damn it! Where did that demon bastard go? Maybe it ran somewhere else. Let's go look. No! It has to be here somewhere. We have the place surrounded. That fucking monster couldn't have gotten away. Hey, check the tree. He might have hidden it. Naruto's blood froze. He could feel his heart go into overdrive as fear gripped his insides. He began to sweat and hyperventilate. Rapid labored breaths escaped his lungs as panic took over. Wait! That's Shodai-sama's sacred tree. We can't just go and climb a national treasure. The ANBU will have us in chains, one of them proclaims. Who gives a fuck? I'm taking that fucking demon out if it's the last thing I do, another said venomously. Naruto was completely taken over by terror at this point as he saw the leaves rustle, indicating someone was making an ascent up the tree. In that moment of pure terror, Naruto, unbeknownst to him, flared his chakra. Next thing he knew, he was falling downward into a black abyss. Ugh, what happened? Said a disoriented Naruto as he sat up and rubbed the back of his sore head. The last thing he remembered was falling all of a sudden when the angry villagers began to climb up the tree. Naruto took a look around his surroundings and found that he was in a dark room. Glancing upwards, he noticed a dark tunnel of some sorts that led straight upwards. It's probably where I fell from. Naruto stood up, intent on exploring this newfound place. Just as he took the first step forward, several lanterns on the ceiling lit up, bathing the room in a warm, white glow. Wow, Naruto whispered in wonder. The room was larger than his entire apartment. The walls were wooden and adorned with intricate designs and carvings. On one wall there were two large symbols etched on it. One he recognized as the Uchiha clan symbol, the other he had no clue, but he felt that he had seen it during his frequent visits to the Hokage's office. There were several large and comfortable sofas off to the side and a small wooden table with several scrolls and books on it. He walked over to the table and picked up what appeared to be several loose papers bound together by a leather cord running through a hole in the top left-hand corner. Whoever wrote on it had really neat handwriting, as it seemed to Naruto to look like the calligraphy that Gigi practiced. He began to read the contents of the first page. One of the first things Madara and I intend to do is open up an academy where our children may learn the shinobi arts. It is imperative that they learn to defend themselves, as the various clans have grown incredibly hostile at the pact made between the Uchiha and Senju. We both fervently pray that our children do not have to live through the horrendous wars that we have yet. We know that things will continue to remain unstable for years to come. Here, I have written down several chakra control exercises here that were meant to be used in said academy. However, Madara quickly tore up my original draft with some unsavory words. To quote, Hashirama Baka. How the hell do you expect our children to do these exercises? They may be fine for chakra monsters like you and me, but mere kids will end up with chakra exhaustion doing these. We're trying to nurture our children, not kill them, asshole. Anyways, I've put too much time and work into this to simply discontinue it. Who knows? We might just have a kid come along with chakra levels equivalent to ours and in need of unorthodox training methods. So without further ado, I present to you, Chakra Control for Monsters, by Hashirama Senju. Naruto put the booklet back down on the table. Sounds interesting. I should tell Gigi about this place, but first I gotta find a way out. He walked away and headed towards an archway that led into a long hallway. Naruto headed down it and saw that there were several more archways along the hall, and that it ended in a dead end. Peering through the first archway he gasped at what he saw. A massive chamber with a ceiling so high that Naruto couldn't see anything except a black expanse. He noticed on the wall adjacent to the entrance that there were several weapons lined across. Knives, kunai, katanas, nodachas, bastard swords, and several other weapons that he could not identify. However, what caught his eyes was a certain section of the wall that was cleared of weapons save for three. One was a gunbya with 3 tomo on it. The second was an oversized sword that was easily bigger than Naruto. The last was the most unique of the three. It was a katana without a guard and shone mercurial silver. Managing to take his eyes off the weapon, Naruto slowly took in the gargantuan room. It's a training room. Realizing the function of the room and deciding there was nothing else to glean from it, he left and went back into the hallway. Looking down the hall, he went to the next archway and stopped before entering. It was filled with rows and rows of scrolls and books. The library was not even half the size of the training room, but it was still impressive. Deciding that it would be better to explore the rest of the compound rather than lose himself in curiosity, Naruto turned around and looked at the last 2 archways. These actually had doors, instead of just being openings in the walls. Opening the first door, he found that it was a rather sizable bathroom complete with a stone shower and an indoor hot spring. Whoever lived here must really have liked their comforts. It's like a luxury hotel here for shinobi. Turning on his heels, Naruto went down to the last room and pried the wood in the doors open. This room was distinctively smaller than the other three and was rather empty for the most part. The only noticeable furniture were two simple beds on opposite sides of the room. Naruto noticed, however, that between the two beds, the wall was covered in pictures. The largest of which depicted two men with their arms draped over each other's shoulders and smiling widely. One of the men had long straight black hair and tan skin. Naruto recognized this man as the Shodaime Hokage because he often saw a picture of him in Gigi's office. The other man also had long black hair, except that his was wild and disheveled. He had a pale complexion that made Naruto think about the Uchiha police force that would always follow him to make sure he did not get into trouble. Naruto looked at some of the other pictures. One of them was of the Shodai standing next to a beautiful woman with red hair. There was another of the Shodai holding a small blonde-haired girl in his arms. Then there was a picture of the other man standing next to someone who looked nearly identical to him, although the man with wild hair looked much younger in this picture. There was a really funny picture with the Shodaime, the wild-haired man and another man who Naruto recognized as the Nidaime Hokage. The Shodaime stood in between the two men and smiled widely while the Nidaime and other man openly glared at one another. Several other pictures adorned the wall, but Naruto simply glanced over to them and made his way to the bed on the right. There was a book, similar to the one he had picked up in the entrance room, laying on the bed. He picked it up and read the title, The Art of Seduction, by Madara Uchiha. Seduction in itself is a form of genjutsu. It is a hidden compulsion that, when mastered, can hone the mind in perfect psychological warfare. The theory behind it is to capture the heart, with the mind and body falling in tow soon afterwards. A subtle movement of the head, a slight shift in weight, they can inspire thoughts of grace and power. The throwing of a kunai should be done in a way that it exemplifies the beauty of ease and show experience and mindset of battle. All these serve to instill yourself in the hearts of both enemies and allies, regardless of sex. Naruto put the book down and began thinking to himself, I see, so that other man next to the Shodaime must be this Madara person. Makes sense. He looks 100% Uchiha to me. As interesting as the book was, Naruto was more concerned about leaving the hidden compound. It would not do to escape the angry mob only to die of starvation from being trapped in a place where he could not get out and no one could find him. Naruto decided to head back to the library as it was the only room he had not actually explored. Re-entering the room, Naruto felt a strange feeling wash over him. He actually enjoyed reading, but because every time he attempted to enter the library, he was unceremoniously kicked out. Walking between rows of scrolls and books, he reached the center of the room that had a large wooden table littered with papers and a rather large scroll. The scroll immediately piqued his interest. He knew that several jutsu were often recorded in such scrolls and were used to teach the higher-level ninja. Maybe I can learn a super cool jutsu and surprise Gigi with it. I can't wait to see the look on his face when I show him. Naruto placed the scroll on the ground and unwound it, sending the scroll rolling all the way to the end of the wall. Wow, it's really big. Examining the scroll, Naruto realized that he could not make heads or tails of it. It was covered in strange symbols and patterns that were entirely foreign to him. He walked along the long piece of parchment, hoping to find something that he could understand. Once he reached the center of the scroll, he found that there was a large empty circle drawn there. He sat down in front of it, contemplating the function of the scroll and what he should do with it. Maybe I should try to put some chakra into it. I remember Gigi sometimes put his finger on a piece of paper and an ANBU popping up out of nowhere. Recalling how the old man taught him to channel chakra a while back, Naruto made the ram symbol with his hands and concentrated until he felt that tugging sensation from his gut. He then placed his hands on the scroll and did his best to send out as much chakra he could. The effect was instantaneous. All the symbols began to glow a faint green and Naruto stared in wonder as the circle in the center turned into an eye, a deep crimson eye that glowed with power. A small black pupil formed in the center, circled by 3 black tomo. Naruto was officially freaked when the eye began to move, shifting, looking around, until its gaze fell on him. The moment it saw him, it bulged and he couldn't help but stare at it. The tomo began to spin and Naruto followed their cycle with his own eyes. Faster and faster they swirled, capturing him in their hypnotic dance until all he saw was a black expanse that quickly swallowed him. Naruto stood dazed, his mind a complete blank as he stared off into the black abyss. His face was completely impassive, and his brilliant blue eyes were glazed over. In that moment no thought passed through his mind, no emotion fluttered in his heart. He simply was. Have you come seeking power? At the sound of the voice, Naruto was brought out of his trance, and he whirled around to find the owner of the voice. He found a tall young man staring down at him, arms crossed. He was dressed in red armor reminiscent of a samurai. Underneath the armor, he wore a full black sleeve shirt and had his hands covered with gloves. Dark leather boots laced over black pants, made out of the same material as his shirt. On his back was the war fan that Naruto had seen in the training room. The young man had pale white skin and thick, wild disheveled black hair. His eyes were the same as the strange eye that he last remembered seeing. Wide-eyed, Naruto breathed, Madara Uchiha, indeed little one. And who might you be? Madara's voice was sharp and strong, one that was used to giving out commands. I'm Naruto Uzumaki S sir, Naruto gulped. Madara's eyes narrowed and he studied Naruto up and down. Interesting. So my first pupil possesses neither his eyes nor his body, rather his chakra, Madara mused. As Naruto put on a confused expression, the Uchiha legend quickly snapped a question. Tell me, young one, you found a scroll and channeled your chakra into it, and then found yourself here, did you not? Naruto simply nodded dumbly. That scroll is a training method Hashirama Senju, and I developed so that we may train future generations without having to pull capable soldiers from the front lines to fill teaching positions. It is a work of genius on our part, truthfully. Jutsu may be sealed away to be used on the battlefield without the expenditure of chakra or time-consuming hand seals, but what we did was far more complex. An intricate system of several seals coupled with a reverse matrix allows for the absorption of chakra and the casting of an indefinite space-time jutsu within a genjutsu. Madara said all this very smugly, but Naruto had no idea what he was talking about. He just continued to stare at the man, still attempting to process the fact one of Konoha's founders was standing in front of him. Upon realizing that Naruto had not understood a word he said, Madara simplified it for him. Scroll takes your chakra and converts it into mine, then casts the genjutsu on you. Oh, Madara resisted the urge to shake his head. Still, I'm surprised you activated it. It takes a large amount of chakra for the genjutsu to be cast. It is why Hashirama and I never utilized it. It is impractical for training young children. Hey, does this mean you're going to train me? Naruto asked excitedly. The idea of being trained by a legend was too good to be true. Madara stared at the young Uzumaki for a while, taking in his bright smile and studying his childlike persona. Madara was not fooled. He could see past the mask that the boy put on. There was a deep grief hidden in those eyes. The glacial ice creeping into those star sapphire eyes had not gone unnoticed by him. Curious, he decided to test the child. Hold out your hand. I will ascertain your worth. Using my hand? How does that work? Madara's eye narrowed and Naruto's hand quickly shot out, and he muttered an apology. This was not a man who you question, Naruto realized, because at that moment he became very frightened. He decided that it would be best to simply obey and shut up. Madara took hold of the boy's hand and closed his eyes in concentration. They stood in this position for several minutes until Madara dropped Naruto's hand and opened his eyes. Naruto couldn't help but notice that his eyes were filled with bitterness and also held an undercurrent of sadness. The Uchiha himself was sorting through the memories he had just viewed in Naruto's mind, and suffice it to say, he was pissed. It seems we failed, old friend. According to this boy's memories, our clans are practically extinct and Konoha has degraded into the bigotry and ignorance that led to the very loss of our families. The very thing you and I fought so hard against. Sighing, Madara took in the sight of the boy in front of him, so filled with hope and innocence. A profound sadness washed through him at the realization at what the very village he worked so hard to create did to this child. He couldn't help but remember raising Izuna, who had that same smile. It was disturbing what the young Uzumaki went through. It was just as bad, if not worse, than his own childhood of constant war and bloodshed. No, it was definitely worse. Madara had been raised in war. This child had been abused in peace and false safety. I have gone through your memories, young one, and I've made a startling discovery. Naruto's smile faltered. Did I fail? Tell me, Naruto, do you know what the Bijou are? Bijou, the young boy asked innocently. You mean like the Nine Tails? Indeed, the Kyuubi is amongst the Bijou. They are beasts of unimaginable power. During my time, Hashirama and myself were the only ones capable of subduing one. Naruto smiled up at the Uchiha and said, yeah, but the fourth managed to kill the Kyuubi. No. He did not. Huh, the Bijou are living masses of chakra. They do not possess a soul like other living creatures. Therefore, they cannot be killed. As embodiments of nature, they are truly immortal. This was nothing like the story that Naruto had heard from Jiji. If the fourth didn't kill it, then what happened? Madara, having made his decision, began laying the foundations of his recently formed plan. They cannot be killed, but they can be sealed. However, a creature as powerful as the Kyuubi can only be sealed in a human. More so, that human must be very young so that its flexible chakra coils can adjust to the Bijou's chakra, else they will die and release the Bijou. You mean to tell me that the fourth? Naruto never finished his sentence as realization dawned on him. The curses, the hate, the way he was always called demon. Then there was how his birthday perfectly coincided with the day of the Kyuubi attack. Naruto couldn't say anything. He was abused his whole life, and the people who he had actually trusted had lied and betrayed him. Tears formed in his eyes, but before they could spill out, a harsh voice entrapped him. Naruto Uzumaki. Madara's eyes glowed crimson and he crossed his arms. He stood tall and proud, his face etched in a grim mask. I have seen men 5 times your age and veterans of many battles who would have ended their own life if they were forced to go through what you have. You have an unyielding will and a very noble bloodline to back it up. I will offer you a deal. A deal? Naruto sniffed as he wiped away unshed tears. Yes. The scroll has converted enough of your chakra into my own to allow me to perform Ningen no Umarekawari no Jutsu. What does that do? It allows me to send all of the chakra I have into your body, modifying it into my own. Madara had to suppress a chuckle at Naruto's look of horror. Do not worry, you will not turn into me, but rather, it will be as if parts of your physiology will change to resemble my own. Almost as if you were my child who inherited my genes. The change will not happen all at once but, gradually over a period of few months. You will inherit my knowledge as well as my powers, which coupled with your Uzumaki and Senju blood, will make you stronger than I ever was. Naruto mulled it over in his head. He could gain the powers of one of the most powerful shinobi to have ever lived, in exchange for some changes in his body that were bound to change anyway due to human growth. What do I have to do in exchange? You did say deal, Madara smirked. Smart child. In exchange for my power I want you to destroy Konoha and rebuild it as the way it was meant to be. Naruto looked thoroughly shocked at what Madara had said. What do you mean destroy Konoha? Madara simply shrugged. The means will be up to you, but I have seen Konoha in your memories, and it is not the one that I worked so hard to strive for. Hashirama and I gave up a lot for the village, and in no way did we mean for it to turn out like this. My terms are this: realize the dream of the Uchiha and Senju clans by making Konoha the most powerful village. Make it so it longer has to suffer the loss and tragedy of war. If an enemy does emerge, our power must be so great that simply by turning our gaze on them they will falter in despair. Naruto crossed his arms and tilted his head as he thought about. In all honesty, Madara was pretty much asking him to become Hokage, which was already his dream. Looking up at the legendary Uchiha, Naruto nodded and said, "Deal? Perfect." Madara smiled as his Sharingan began to spin madly. Chakra in its simplest and purest form desires one thing: balance. Push and pull. In and out. Yin and yang. Such is the principle that the world is based on, and it is what keeps it functioning. In my meditations I have found that therein lies the greatest potential for shinobi. By utilizing what I like to call true chakra, a human can unlock a newfound power and untapped potential. The difficulties, however, is that humans, over time, have come to develop elemental affinities through constant use of jutsu. A single person becomes fond of a certain element, and utilizes it throughout their life. This causes elemental chakra to build up within the body, which becomes an inheritable trait to any offspring produced. I speculate that is also the source of those abilities that are unique to bloodlines. However, the elemental affinity is both a curse and a blessing, as it gives way to techniques of respective affinity while, at the same time, converting true chakra into elemental chakra. It is a great loss because true chakra can be so easily tainted and difficult to store within the body, yet its effects and benefits are astounding. I found that it greatly enhances the physical being, resulting in an increase of overall performance, strength, speed, stamina, as well as superior senses. I have also found that it increases one's growth, even when said person is well into the prime of their life. Aging process is also significantly diminished, evident by the fact that at the age of 36 I look barely 25, and if I manage to die a natural death, I believe that the human lifespan will also be increased a great deal. I theorize that perhaps the Uzumaki clan somehow has a hidden reservoir of true chakra within their bodies, hence their great vitality and unnaturally long lifespan. The only way to unlock true chakra is through intense meditation and excellent chakra control. The process is not unlike the one used for senjutsu, however. Whereas natural energy requires an open mind to commune with nature, true chakra can only be found by turning one's sight inward. The chakra within the body must be refined by having the chakra circulate through the body at rapid speeds and fine and highly compressed waves. This is extremely dangerous, as if it is not done with the proper amount of control, the body will be torn to shred from the inside and is guaranteed to result in death. After 2 hours of circulation, the elemental chakra will be forced out of the body. Slowly cease the circulation of chakra and allow it to spread to every cell in the body. When the body is saturated, continue to meditate and allow body to gradually adapt to the true chakra. Once the process has been repeated for several days and the body has become accustomed to it, you can seal true chakra within your body, allowing you to utilize in battle without fear of having it tainted by elemental chakra. Final excerpt. Hashirama Senju. Naruto closed the book after reading over the passage for the 23rd time. He couldn't help but marvel at the wonders that the Shodaime had discovered. Where the man found the time to experiment on jutsu and his crazy theories with all the wars he fought in, Naruto didn't know. Not to mention there were several dozens of more works that he had authored down in the hidden compound. If the writings of those two had been released to Konoha instead of being hidden down here, the Fire Country would be ruling over the entire continent, the young boy thought. As Naruto got out of the chair and headed out of the library, he went towards the bath he was so fond of using. Entering the luxurious room, carved entirely of stone, he headed over to the counter and stripped out of clothes and carefully examined himself in the mirror. The Shodaime Hokage had been correct. After a year of utilizing true chakra, he had grown quite tall and his body had become more lean and defined. He was easily the strongest 10-year-old in the village. It had been 4 years since he discovered the compound hidden away by Hashirama and Madara. 4 years since Madara had poured his chakra into him and had given him access to the ancient Uchiha's power and abilities. Again, looking at himself in the mirror, Naruto took notice of the changes that occurred within him over the few months after Madara had performed his technique. His usual pale blonde hairs had grown thicker and wilder, with deep black color seeping into their roots. His features had become more angular, and he even took on Madara's jawline. To him, His most significant change had been his eyes. Eyes, which were once a brilliant and shining sapphire, were now cold glaciers. Focusing chakra into his eyes, he watched impassively as they turned into a deep crimson and 3 black tonal formed around the pupil. It was amazing. The true chakra already enhanced his vision a great, and coupled with the Sharingan his eyesight was probably the best in the entire world right now. He channeled even more chakra into his eyes, feeling the chakra twist and grow heavy. The sensation was always a strange one for him. It was as if cold ice water was pouring itself onto his eyeballs, which was strange because according to Madara's memories the sensation should be a burning one. Staring in fascination as his eyes changed shape and he watched as the colors reversed themselves. The tomo grew and turned a vivid crimson, as a 3-armed swirl, reminiscent of a galaxy of stars surrounded by the black void of space, formed. This was Naruto's personal eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He believed that due to his Senju and Uzumaki DNA, it shifted from what would have been Madara's original one. Not that it mattered. He had perfected his Sharingan, and took it to heights Madara never could. Deactivating his EMS, Naruto slipped into the hot waters of the underground spring. Oh yeah, say what you will about the 2 founders of Konoha. They knew how to relax in style. He had spent the first 2 years after Madara had performed the Ningen no Amarekawari no Jutsu doing nothing but chakra control exercises and physical training. With Madara's massive repertoire of jutsu at his command, he really didn't need to learn any additional jutsu for the time being. Of course, the most challenging thing in his training regime happened to be his physical growth. With growing taller and his limbs getting longer at a rapid rate, it proved extremely difficult to keep up with his taijutsu and kenjutsu training regimes. He became uncoordinated and sloppy in his movements. It was ridiculous to have mastered several katas and styles to only become disordered in a couple of months because he overreached or struck too wide. It was the main damnable reason that he was still stuck attending the ninja academy. He would have left the damn place if he didn't have a good enough performance to get hell out of there early. Here he was, capable of pulling off Kage-level ninjutsu and having chakra control not seen since the first Hokage, and stuck in an academy filled with children who could barely lift up a sword let alone swing it. He was actually capable of passing the exams, however. He would be forced to use higher level techniques that would give away his advanced training. The worst part was, since the council became fearful of another Itachi Uchiha, they rose the graduation age from 12 to 14. I should be out there putting my plan into motion to destroy this pathetic weak village and replace it with my own. Not wasting my time with untrained brats, Naruto thought vehemently. Getting out of the spring, Naruto grabbed a towel and dried himself off. He went back to the counter and mirror to put on fresh clothes. Throwing on white cargo pants and a sleeveless black top, he placed a black hottie over his head that had the Uzumaki symbol tailored onto its back in dark blue. Leaving the bath, he sent himself over the massive training room and without any hand signs made 51 shadow clones. The odd number being because one would have to go to the academy and suffer through the cumbersome lays of prepubescent drama. Oh wait, today is taijutsu practice day, damn it. I'll have to go myself. He could easily take any academy student or chunin instructor, but it was always best to be cautious. A true shinobi is always looking for the unexpected and never takes any unnecessary risks. It wouldn't do for the instructors to learn he was capable of performing a kenjutsu like the shadow clone technique. It raised too many questions and brings unwanted attention. No, the best thing to do would be to act as normal as possible and have slightly better than average performance. He then divided his clones to train while he was away. 10 would work on taijutsu, another 10 would work on kenjutsu, and 20 would work on mastering the various jutsu he had sealed away in his head. As for the last 11, they would read Hashirama's and Madara's personal works and other documents the two had stored away down in his secret sanctuary. As left for the entrance of the compound, he expanded his senses to see if anybody was near the tree that hid his hideout. One of the great joys Naruto had discovered was that he was a sensory type and had prodigious skills in that field. Finding that there was no one around, he left, and performed a shunsin to the academy with a sigh. As Naruto walked onto the academy grounds, he immediately felt several chakra signatures hidden away and following him. It had become a daily game for him and his clones to lose the Anbu that followed him around town to keep watch over him and make sure he kept out of trouble. Of course, right after class ended, his clones would go to the bathroom and dispel themselves, leaving behind a very peeved and confused Black Ops squad. At one point the Sandaime had even asked if he would be willing to help train rookie Anbu by allowing them to use him as hunt and retrieve missions. The practice was discontinued when each and every one of them failed. Naruto glanced up at a tree where an Anbu was discreetly hidden away and waved towards him. There was a slight rustling of leaves to let him know that the Anbu acknowledged him. Over the years he had become familiar with their chakra signatures and had eventually let them know that he was aware of their presence. It was strange really, 90% of the village hated him, yet the division of shinobi that carried out covert and secret tasks under the direct authority of the Hokage shared a bond with him and accepted him. Hell, he was allowed to freely roam Anbu headquarters that was even off limits to most jonin. It was the only place, aside from the Hokage's office, that he was treated like a normal child. However, there used to be another group that followed him, but they had different chakra auras and practically no emotions traceable to his senses. They also looked different. For one, their masks weren't animal-themed, Rather, they were entirely blank and hadn't engraved upon it. Not knowing what to do about them, he actually went to the old man to ask about them when he was around 8 years old. Granted, he had to indirectly inform the elderly Hokage that he was a censor, but it was worth it. Naruto inwardly smiled at the memory that led up to that particular visit. Flashback. Naruto made his way up to the Hokage's office and nodded at the ANBU standing guard as he was regularly seen coming and going. Continuing down the hall, he went straight for the door, and being stopped right as he reached the doorknob. Hey! Who do you think you are? You can't just enter the Hokage's office. You need an appointment. Naruto turned to find a middle-aged lady with too many layers of makeup staring down at him with anger and disgust, plain as day on her face. Wonderful, Naruto thought. A new secretary. Guess this one hasn't been trained yet, and besides, the woman sneered in a hushed tone. The Hokage wants nothing to do with you, you demon brat. So it's going to be like that, huh? Naruto thought as he raised an eyebrow. Then he abruptly turned on his heels and marched back down the hall towards to the two ANBU, which one of them he recognized. Oh good, it's Cat. With her here this is much easier. As soon as he got close, he activated one of Madara's most powerful and devastating dojutsus. Puppy dog eyes no jutsu. The moment Cat saw the little blonde boy with wide watery eyes and quivering lower lip, all ANBU training went out the window, and she immediately enveloped him in her embrace and said, "Oh Naruto, baby, what's wrong? Did someone hurt you?" Naruto gave a few sobs and let tears fall onto the ANBU's shoulder before he answered her. "See Cat, am I sniff sniff really a monster? That mean old lady said that I'm an evil demon and sniff that I killed the Yondaime." "No, of course not, sweetie. That old lady just forgot to take her medicine, and when she does she says crazy things. Hawk here will go take her to the hospital, won't you, Hawk?" "Of course I will," said the tall male ANBU. With that he walked down the hall, muttering about heartless civilians picking on innocent kids, leaving Naruto still being embraced by Cat, who was now running her fingers through his hair. Within seconds there was the sound of indignant shrieking, and then it died out, going eerily quiet. Hawk returned carrying an unconscious secretary across his shoulder. "I'm taking her to the hospital, okay? She won't bother anyone anymore." Naruto simply nodded and wiped a tear away as Hawk left with the rotten bitch. Cat put her hands on shoulders and looked at him through the eye holes of her mask. "You can go talk to Hokage-sama now," but first she lifted part of her mask, revealing a delicate jawline, and tilted her head towards him. Naruto pecked her on the cheek and smiled. "Bye, Cat. Bye, Naruto. Behave yourself." "I will." As he turned back into the hall, a pale smile crept onto his face along with a single thought: suckers. He then walked past the now empty secretary desk and entered the Hokage's office. Poor Gigi is going to have to find a new secretary, hopefully one that has some common sense this time. Flashback end. Naruto sighed as he entered the academy. To him, there was no hell greater than the sheer boredom he was put through in this place. He mentally promised himself that in his Konoha, the academy would center more on practical studies rather than theory-based ones. Less lecture and more sparring. Honestly, I should just let Kurama run free and destroy the place. At least one of us wouldn't be bored. No, he couldn't do that, the more logical side of him argued. In order to build the most powerful nation on the damn continent, he would have to do things strategically and subtly. With another sigh, he made his way to his classroom and mentally erased the screeching and yells of his fellow peers. It's going to be a long day. Sigh. 2 years later, Naruto was making his way towards the Hokage's office, his glacial eyes filled fierce determination. He walked with the gait of a man with a mission. His face set impassively, yet a hint of mirth showing through. Naruto had grown even taller over the past 2 years. Currently, he was settled in at 5'5", 165 centimeters, quite tall for a 12-year-old. His hair had grown even longer, so now he kept it tied in a thin ponytail that started at the nape of his neck and ended at the middle of his back. His bangs covered his forehead and fell just over his eyes. All in all, Naruto was on the verge of manhood and caught the eye of every female in Konoha, even the ones that hated him. As he neared the office, he nodded at the Umbu standing guard and pointedly ignored the secretary. They knew better than to stop him unless the Hokage was in a meeting. Naruto knocked on the door, smirking to himself as he gave the old man a warning to hide his porn books. After a few seconds there was a gruff, "Enter." Naruto entered and said, "Yo Gigi," and closed the door behind him. The Sandaime smiled up at Naruto. "Ah Naruto, what can I do for you?" Naruto sat down in a simple wooden chair in front of the Hokage's desk. The damn thing was uncomfortable. He once told the old man to get more comfortable ones, but was informed that it was a subtle tactic to allow the Hokage to appear more ease while the person in the opposite side of the desk shifted around feeling discomfort. A simple psychological tactic to give him a small advantage in negotiations or questionings. Sarutobi Hiruzen may not be as strong as he was in his prime, but his mind was sharper and more dangerous than ever. Well, for one, you could find a better place to hide that smut you read, instead of dumping a stack of papers on it. Sarutobi flushed and quickly took said book and threw it into one of his desk drawers while performing several hand signs to hide it with the genjutsu. Naruto shook his head and sighed while adding another mental note to an ever-growing list for the future. Maintain active sex life to keep yourself from getting addicted to porn in advanced age. Straightening himself and folding his hands on his desk, the Sandaime asked, as if nothing had happened, "How may I be of service, my boy?" "Gigi, I need you to do something for me." "Oh?" Sarutobi said, while raising his eyebrows. The boy never asked anything of him these days. In fact, he mainly kept to himself and went off to who knows where to do who knows what. It bothered the elderly Hokage a great deal. Several years ago, Naruto changed a great deal. Gone were the bright smiles and spontaneous outbursts that usually marked his presence. That child was replaced by a cold and distant one, who rarely displayed emotion and simply stared at you impassively. Sorrow filled the old man as he felt that he had failed the young man sitting before him. The village ostracized and openly hated him, and he was powerless to stop them. This young boy had to suffer through so much at the hands of people who owed their very lives to him. It was downright disgusting. "I'm so sorry, Minato. I've failed you. Gigi, I want you to pull me from the academy," Naruto said. Whatever the old Hokage was expecting, this wasn't it. He immediately began spluttering, and Naruto, "But why?" "It's your dream to become Hokage, isn't it?" "My dream is to change Konoha for the better and make it unrivaled," he answered coolly. "Being Hokage isn't necessarily a must in order to accomplish that." The Sandaime Hokage stared at the young man who used to scream to the world that he would take his place as Hokage when he was a small child. "Naruto, what has this village done to you?" thought the Sandaime sadly. As for the why, well, to be frank, the academy is more of a determinant rather than a beneficiary at this point. "What do you mean a determinant?" he asked Naruto, in wonder. Closing his eyes and sighing, Naruto thought over on what he was about to do and decided it was worth it. Opening his eyes, he fixed the Hokage with a dead serious look. "Can you secure your office?" he whispered. Immediately shifting from a doting grandfather to a Hokage meaning all business, Sarutobi nodded and activated the privacy seals in his office. Looking at the young man and staring back at him in all seriousness, he asked, "What is this all about, Naruto? I know about me being a jinchuriki, and before you even ask how, let me just say that the signs are all there and all you have to do is carefully read them. In fact, I'm positive the Aburame and Nara in my class have figured it out. You might want to talk to their parents." Ignoring his surprise, Sarutobi decided to pursue Naruto's reasoning. "Do you fear that those two will tell others and that you will be forced to leave?" "Pfft, I couldn't care less about them," he said coldly. "The academy has nothing to offer me. I estimate my abilities to be around mid to high chunin. Do you have proof of your claim?" the Hokage asked seriously. Naruto simply held out his hand and gathered chakra in the middle of his palm. Within moments a sphere of ice blue, rotating chakra filled his hand. The Sandaime stared eyes wide and mouth agape. "Raisin Gan! But how?" "Mom and Dad both left a chakra imprint within the seal. They passed down several useful things for me to know. For instance, the Kyuubi attack was the doing of a Rouge Uchiha. Mom seemed to think it was Madara Uchiha, but I have it good authority it wasn't him." Sarutobi sat there in silence for several moments, as his brain processed all the information. 1. Naruto was aware of his parentage. 2. He now knew that the Kyuubi incident was an instigated attack. 3. Somehow, the last possible name he wanted to hear was being brought up. Pushing aside Naruto's lineage, he focused on the Kyuubi incident. "What do you mean by good authority?" "When it isn't trying to rip me to shreds, the Kyuubi sometimes speaks with me. It informed me that it is familiar with Madara Uchiha's chakra and this Uchiha wasn't him. Not to mention Dad was also pretty adamant that it wasn't him. You might want to look for any Uchiha unaccounted for before Itachi slaughtered them." Sarutobi sighed as he leaned back into his chair and ran his hands over his wizened face. "Very well, Naruto, you have given me much to think about." "And my request?" the blonde boy asked. "I will take you out of the academy, however. The law does not permit you to become a genin until you are 14. You will have to take the genin test with your graduating class." Naruto nodded and got up to leave, but before he could reach the door, the Hokage had called out to him. "Naruto, you said that Minato was adamant it was not Madara Uchiha. Do you know why your father would say that?" Naruto smiled inwardly. He had purposely inserted that piece of information, or rather lie, knowing the old man would catch on to it. "Gigi, you know that my father came to Konoha as an orphan refugee during the Second Shinobi War, right?" Sarutobi nodded his head, not seeing where this was going, but let Naruto continue. "Well, actually my dad was sent to Konoha by his sickly mother after his father died so that he would be safe." Sarutobi frowned to himself. That wasn't the story that Minato had told him numerous times over the years. "You see, Gigi, Dad's dad, my grandfather, just happens to be Madara Uchiha, and the two of them were apparently quite close." The Sandaime Hokage gawked at Naruto in bewilderment. His reaction was quite hilarious, and if Naruto wasn't in the middle of an Academy Award-winning performance, he would have laughed. "Why you can't be as serious, Naruto?" Sarutobi spluttered. Naruto closed his eyes in a silent sigh, and the Sandaime stared in horror when he reopened them. A pair of fully mature Crimson Sharingan stared at the old Hokage. "Ironic, isn't it? The Leaf's greatest hero happens to be the son of its greatest traitor." Sarutobi was mentally exhausted at this point. Naruto had let on just one startling revelation after the next. To think that Minato of all people was the son of Madara Uchiha was a near impossible concept. Yet here was Naruto. Minato's son was staring down at him with the Sharingan. GG. I am not in the habit of handing out family secrets. I trust that you will keep this to yourself. All of it. Sarutobi simply nodded absently, still attempting to absorb the shocking revelation about his successor/predecessor. Good. Also, I would like to tell you that I do not begrudge you on your choice to keep my parentage secret. It's bad enough that Konoha hates me. I do not need IWA and Kumo on my ass as well. Falling out of his thoughts, the Sandaime fully realized the weight of Naruto's words. I am sorry, Naruto. I really wished to tell you, but your safety was paramount. I also wish that I could have announced it to the people to keep you from being hated, but the elderly Hokage sighed as his shoulders slumped. No need for apologies. I will be going then. The Sandaime was shocked, again, when Naruto seemed to be sucked into a hole in the air and simply disappeared without a trace. That boy is bad for my heart, he thought to himself while chuckling. The sun was setting behind the Hokage monument, making the lone figure sitting on top of the Sandaime Hokage's face invisible. Said figure had a maniacal smile spread on his face that, if seen by the Konoha civilians, would ensure mass panic and mayhem. The old man's guilt makes him easy to manipulate. Sentimental old fool. His actions have divided the village into numerous factions. Clans, civilians and shinobi groups are so busy vying for power that they leave Konoha weak. The space a few feet from Naruto became distorted and one of his clones walked out. It walked over to him and handed him a scroll. The documents you specified are sealed within, said the clone before poofing out of existence. Naruto smirked as the clone's memories were added to his. The documents were entirely legal, though the method of obtaining them were entirely illegal. The end justifies the means after all. Time to pay a visit to one dad's old friends, Naruto muttered to himself. Standing up, he swallowed himself in Kamui as the maniacal smile reappeared onto his face. Phase 1 of his plan had begun. Drip drip, drip drip. Slowly, a pair of eyelids lifted, revealing eyes akin to the northern seas captured in the frigid white wastes of the poles. Glazed over, not fully aware where they are, the eyes watched as ripples travel through the water below and flow into seemingly endless darkness. Drifting there for several moments, the eyes simply stare off into nothingness. No thought could be discerned from them, nor any brief fleeting of emotion. Apparently empty as the space they were currently located in. Yet a subtle shift in the ripples causes the eyes to stir. As the glaze over the eyes drifts away, the water below begins to slowly frost away and, as the eyes completely clear, the entire scape turns into a frozen expanse of snow and ice. The darkness recedes, leaving a pale gray sky streaked with hues of gold and pink. I don't see a battle raging outside. If that's not the case, what's with the visit? Getting lonely, brat? A single icy eye peers through blonde locks over a black-clad shoulder towards the direction of the heavy and deep voice. Turning completely, the eyes stare up unimpressed at the sheer mass of blood red, clashing terrifically with the white and blue realm. Resting upon colossal human-shaped claws rippling in crimson fur, an equally massive head sporting a Cheshire grin filled with man-sized fangs, took over the vision of the glacial eyes. Peering into the cold eyes was another pair of the opposite affinity, seeming of raging fire as scarlet irises pushed against ink-black slits, each color trying for dominance. The sound of pulsing gales came around as tails rose like great leviathans and thrashed about. Sorry. Got lost in thought. Didn't mean to disturb you, the softer yet, equally strong voice responded. The snow reverberated as a dark chuckle raced across the hollow field of ice. Then I suggest you leave, the powerful voice growled in amusement. The little snake is about to ensnare you. With that, a massive claw smashed down onto the opposite eyes and the body they belonged to. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he was forcibly ejected back into reality. He glanced at the halls covered in dark gray tiles and realized he was walking down an Umbu headquarters corridor. Before he could recall his intentions, a soft pair of somethings were pushed against his back as arms encircled his waist. Immediately a mask of annoyance fell onto his face as his cheek was squished together with another person's. "Na, are you Chan? Were you planning on leaving without seeing little old me?" A sultry female voice whispered in his ear. "Anko," Naruto replied curtly. "Ah. No need to sound so cold, Naruto-chan. Say. How do you get your skin to be soft and creamy?" Anko asked while continuously rubbing her cheek against his. Naruto closed his eyes in a silent sigh of annoyance. "You know, most women would kill to have skin like yours, not to mention the pleasure of feeling it rub against them during a hot and steamy night." At this point, Anko's hands had entered his kimono top and were now freely exploring his pale chiseled chest. 1. I wouldn't know anything about that. 2. You're molesting me. Anko had now moved her head down and was slowly nuzzling his collarbone with her chin. "How cute, Naruto-chan. Are you saving yourself for your Wani-sama? And it's not molestation if you're enjoying it," Anko whispered seductively. In responsive, Naruto turned his neck and bit Anko's exposed ear. Hard. With a yelp, she sharply elbowed him in the solar plexus, and he was forced to let go. She then swiftly turned, neatly tripping him in the process, and quickly mounted him, giving him a full view of her. She was a beautiful young woman with purple hair, barely into her 20s, and was wearing a long pale yellow trench coat over an armor mesh shirt and a mini skirt that was more mini than skirt. In the few seconds Naruto had been appreciating her air assets, Anko had him pinned to the floor with ninja wire and kunai. Normally this would have been easily avoidable for Naruto, but he had to keep up with his facade of being only Chunin level. Anko had proceeded to undo Naruto's kimono top and slowly traced the tips of her fingers across the smooth muscles of his abs. Anko, Naruto deadpanned. She stopped to stare at him. Enough. No, she smiled cheerfully and in the blink of an eye, slashed a kunai across his cheek and began lapping up the blood that was flowing. However, due to Naruto's accelerated healing, the wound quickly closed. In response, Anko gave an insane smirk. That's what I love about you, Naruto-chan. I can keep cutting you and cutting you. As soon as she said that statement, she slowly drew a line across his chest and began dragging her tongue across the ruby droplets that formed. You really should stop doing this, Anko. But Naruto-chan, it's so much fun. If you keep this up, one of these days I'm going to rape you, he said in a completely cold and neutral voice. Anko felt shivers travel up her spine and looked down at the bound young man with angelic features with deep hunger embedded into her eyes. She began grinding her hips across his lower abdominals. Naruto-chan, she moaned. You're making me horny. A shadow of a smile crept onto his thin lips. By Anko. Anko went wide-eyed and said, Don't you depoof. Before she could finish her sentence, Naruto burst out of existence in a cloud of smoke, leaving Konoha's snake mistress livid and streaming curses loud enough to be heard throughout the Anbu HQ. Sitting on top of Anbu headquarters, the corners of Naruto's mouth twitched as the Shadow Clone's experience was transferred to him. If it wasn't for the fox's warning, he'd be trapped with a sadist with a snake fetish. He made a mental note to allow the fox to have some fun in the future, and cut it loose for a short amount of time. Inhaling silently through his nose, Naruto surveyed Konoha from his vantage point. Anbu headquarters was located behind the Hokage Tower, close the gargantuan monument. About a quarter of a mile away was the Torture and Interrogation Department building, housing several captured foreign shinobi, traitors and whoever ended up on the bad side of the Hokage. The three buildings, the Hokage's Tower, Anbu HQ and the TI building were the most secure buildings in the village. Of course, Naruto could easily sneak in and out of the buildings with ease. His stealth coupled with his sensory abilities made him the best infiltrator in the nation. In fact, once the Anbu knew of how he had left the academy, they had immediately taken their favorite blonde for further training under their watch. The Hokage, for the last 3 weeks, had to deal with several of his Anbu captains pleading with him to allow Naruto to be drafted into Black Ops. His natural talent would make him perfect for infiltration and assassination missions. As Naruto sat, gazing outward and taking in the peaceful scenery, he felt a chakra signature appear behind. He slowly moved his head to gaze over his shoulder at the person and found an Anbu with a sparrow mask. The Anbu winced as the cold frozen eyes locked with his own. He knew of the boy but interacted with him very little. A lot of the upper-level Anbu were on friendly terms with him, but the rest normally stayed away. The kid had an aura that screamed danger to the elite shinobi. The way it was so cold and even oppressive gave him the presence of a silent killer. It was an all-too-familiar aura. Identical to one of Konoha's greatest traitors, Itachi Uchiha. Breaking away from that frosty gaze, the Anbu felt shivers travel through him. Uzumaki Naruto, you are to report to the Hokage's tower, and immediately make your way to the council chambers. Clear and concise, the Anbu delivered his message as he was ordered to. However, Naruto simply returned to look back at the rooftops of Konoha, acting as if he had never heard the Anbu. A full minute passed as the two stayed perfectly still. When the Anbu finally decided to reiterate his message and step forward, Naruto burst into hundreds of black butterflies, leaving behind a faint dust cloud of dark purple. Too much like Itachi, Naruto strode down the hall and made his way to the heavy white doors guarded by 2 Anbu. As he approached them, he gave them a silent nod of acknowledgement, which they returned before patting him down to make sure he wasn't armed. The only things they pulled off him were 2 scrolls. Though he couldn't see their faces, he could feel they were surprised when they saw that one of the scrolls had the Fire Daimyo's insignia sealed onto it. They gave that one back to him because anything with the Fire Daimyo's emblem was not susceptible to search without the bearer's permission or expressed consent from the daimyo himself. The other one they unwound to examine. Storage scroll, he voiced impassively. One of them nodded before running his hand, laced with blue chakra over the scroll, making sure it did not contain any weapons or harmful substances. After thoroughly checking it, they handed it back to him. They parted the doors and let the young man through. The Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, sighed for the 23rd time in the last hour. The council was bickering as usual. Well, to be fair, the civilian side was bickering while the shinobi side was doing their best to ignore their counterparts and curb the desire to kill them. It was the usual ritual that went on and usually resulted in nothing getting done. However, the useless prattle quickly fell away as the council doors flew wide open. In strode a tall young man with flowing pale blonde hair and dark streaks of black in his roots. A black kimono top draped over his shoulders and was open enough to show his collarbones, white and pale. His impassive face, shaped with sharp angles and angelic features, coolly passed over the council. Finally his glacial eyes settled on the Hokage. Sarutobi looked at the young man with confusion and surprise etched onto his face. Naruto, he breathed. What are you doing here? A pink-haired woman from the civilian council stood up. I believe I can clarify that, Hokage-sama. I was the one who had him summoned here. The old Hokage leveled the woman with a glare, and she shrunk back into her seat. Councilwoman Haruno. Care to explain your actions? He gritted through his teeth. Well, Hokage-sama, the woman said, trying to act dignified. It has been brought to my attention that this boy, she sneered, is no longer attending the ninja academy. I would like an explanation as to why, and if he will not be a shinobi, then what is to be done with him? Several of the civilian council members began to voice their dissatisfaction, saying that Naruto should be forced back into the academy, or be put under house arrest. None of them dared to call for his death right in front of him for fear of breaking the Sandame's law. It is curious, Naruto's voice broke through the voices of discontent, that Konoha's governing body is so interested in a single academy dropout. Could there a specific reason for this unreasonable interest? He asked innocently. Tension filled the room as Naruto's question brought everyone in the council dangerously close to breaking a law concerning an S-class secret. The Hokage, fully aware of Naruto's knowledge of his status, saw the mirth behind his eyes. Naruto, you devil, what game are you playing? As the council remained deathly quiet, it was Danzo to Hiruzen's left that broke the silence. Is this true, Sarutobi? Have you truly pulled the boy out of the academy? Danzo's question expertly dispelled the tension, while simultaneously brushing away Naruto's question. Yes, Danzo, Sarutobi sighed. I took Naruto out of the academy. May I ask why? Asked the bandaged cripple. Indeed, Hokage-sama. We deserve to know what the reasoning behind your decision is, said a disgustingly obese civilian councilman. Hamura, one of the Hokage's advisors, spoke up. Perhaps it would be best if we dismiss the boy before discussing this matter? Naruto interjected himself in their conversation. There will no discussion of any sort. This council has no jurisdiction over me, the pink-haired Haruno screeched. Be silent, brat. We can do what, Eve? She quickly lost her voice as a cold wave of death slammed down hard into the room, making the shinobi council and the Anbu guards tense visibly. Naruto's face had hardened and his entire body was leaking a murderous aura that was pulsating menacingly. The civilian side looked ready to drop as the visible strain on their faces showed, from the oppressive aura in the air. And as soon as it was there, it disappeared just as quick. Several of the clan heads glanced nervously at each other, disturbed at how easily a 12-year-old boy could unleash such thick killing intent. Shikaku Nara, head of the Nara clan and Jounin commander, was the second highest-ranking shinobi in the village. He shifted in his seat and said, Naruto-kun, why would you believe that you are not under the authority of this council? Naruto met the man's gaze and he shivered at the eye contact with the frozen eyes. As I am not a shinobi, I do not fall under the authority of the shinobi council, and the same holds true for the civilian side due to my being a jinchuriki. A collective gasp went around the room and everyone stared wide-eyed. No one expected for Naruto to know his status as a jinchuriki. The Sandame groaned inwardly at all the crap he would now have to deal with. Naruto's revelation of his knowledge gave the perfect excuse for the civilian council to stir up trouble. So you know, Danzo stated. Naruto nodded in Danzo's direction. A jinchuriki is a military asset, and since I am not a shinobi of Konoha, I fall under the direct authority of the Hokage. No other body may claim jurisdiction over me. This is ridiculous. The demon is aware of itself and is attempting to break away from our control. It is too much of a threat to let it continue to live. We must kill it at once, the pink-haired banshee shrieked. Several of the clan heads visibly winced at the sound of her voice. Some Inuzuka scoffed at the idiotic bitch. In her opinion, the pink annoyance should be executed for damage she caused to everyone's ears whenever she spoke. It must fall under the category of assault or battery, right? If the Gaki really was the Kyuubi, we'd all be dead, and I doubt there'd be a thing we could do to stop him. So shut up and sit down and give us some respite from that damn awful voice of yours. The squawking woman quickly shut up and sat down while sending a venomous glare at Some. Shikaku sighed. Naruto is right in the legal sense. This council has no authority over him. In fact, the only time someone other than the Hokage would be able to give him an order would be during war. Damn brat played the rules so well he effectively cut off the entire village's hold on him. The moment we don't have a Hokage, he could walk out the front doors of Konoha, and we wouldn't be able to do a damn thing. Troublesome. The civilian council was now in an uproar. They wanted Naruto confined or dead, and he had, for all intents and purposes, left their control. He's a danger to our village. We should immediately kill him. Our children can't be safe with him around. The Yondaime would want him dead in revenge. At the last remark, the entire shinobi council flared their killing intent at the mention of their beloved lost leader. Mikoto Uchiha, one of the survivors of the Uchiha massacre at the hands of her son, shot up, quivering with rage. Don't you dare, she seethed. Don't you dare use Minato's name to justify murder. As the council became deathly quiet, Naruto began to do the last thing called for in this kind of situation. He began stripping. And Naruto? Just what do you think you are doing? Sarutobi asked incredulously. By the time he had finished asking, Naruto had taken his kimono top off. Every female in the room blushed furiously as they leaned forward to better appreciate Naruto's smooth abs. Making a one-handed seal, Naruto began to channel chakra, putting everyone, especially the Umbu, on high alert. For the second time, since he entered the room, Naruto caused a collective gasp that ushered throughout the room. Everyone stared as the strange symbols appeared in black over the boy's pale chiseled abdominals. Behold, the last act of the Yondaime Hokage. The seal that prevents the Kyuubi from running rampart, Naruto stated with his head held high, as if the seal was some sort of badge of honor. Many people shifted nervously and averted their gaze as if the smallest act could break the seal and let loose the monster that nearly ended them all. GG. Mind telling us all what kind of seal this is? Sarutobi frowned and said, "It is an 8-trigram seal designed by the Yondaime Hokage himself." "I would know. I was present at the sealing myself." Naruto nodded to himself, and turned his gaze toward Danzo. "You wouldn't happen to know how the seal functions, would you?" Danzo stared at the boy for a few minutes, inwardly cursing and praising the boy for his tactics. If he said he didn't, he would appear less knowledgeable than Hiruzen and would be deemed weaker. He couldn't lie, not with Hiruzen, Hamiura and Koharu sitting right next to him. They know how the seal functions and would immediately challenge him if he spoke false. Clever brat. He's having me reinforce his position by making it seem I'm on his side. Uzumaki Naruto, I've overlooked your capacity. Sighing to himself as he could feel the headache come, Danzo informed the council on the seal. The seal is formed through 2 4-symbol seals. One siphons chakra from the host to uphold the seal as it needs to be constantly reinforced to keep the bijou captive. The other works in the opposite way, siphoning the beast's chakra and allowing the host to access its power. Hence the reason jinchuriki are considered the ultimate weapons of war. Naruto gave an infuriating smirk to Danzo before turning towards Shikaku and asking, "Nara-san? What do you think would happen to the seal if said host was killed?" "It would be troublesome," he offered in a bored tone. Lazy-ass everyone in the room thought together. "Would you care to clarify, Shikaku-dano?" asked a curious Hayashi Hyuga. With a sigh, Shikaku explained, "With the host dead, the seal would no longer have a constant stream of chakra to support it. It would fail and release that troublesome fox." Everyone in the room went tense and cast a glance at Naruto. The more clever people in the room realized that Naruto effectively bargained for his life by holding the entire village hostage. A single thought went through their heads. This boy is dangerous. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen of the council. By all means, go ahead and kill me. Just remember that when you do, you'll be faced with that damn fox, and it's stronger than ever, Naruto said with a vicious gleam in his eyes. Silence filled the room as cold dread settled in every person in the room. "Naruto," Sarutobi deadpanned. "What do you mean that the fox is stronger?" Turning towards the shinobi council, Naruto's face became hard and impassive. His angelic-like face accentuating the cruel edges of his features. "You were all there," he stated in a cold, hard voice. Deeper and more powerful than what he had used before. "What was it like? To be in the presence of the Kyuubi?" The shinobi shifted in their seats uncomfortably, preferring not to remember the events of that night 12 years ago. Pale and sweating, Inoichi Yamanaka whispered, "It was horrifying. I couldn't even breathe. Just looking at it suffocated me. I thought I was going to go insane with fear." Chusa Akimichi was the next one to speak. "I never felt afraid in my life. The fox was madness itself. Its chakra was so thick. So malevolent. I could feel the hate crawl over me." Naruto gave a single nod toward the 2 men. "Indeed, the Kyuubi is a coalescence of chakra filled with malice and powered by a wicked intellect. And it has been feeding," Naruto added while turning toward the civilian side, who flinched with fear and meeting the frigid eyes filled with unbridled fury. Every scathing remark. Every hate-filled glare. All the words of disgust, and the consistent beatings. "The fox has gorged itself on your actions. For 12 years Konoha has nurtured the fox, empowering it." Everyone looked at the young man in horror as they heard his revelation. Konoha had made its own worst enemies stronger. "So yes. Kill me if you will. Just remember, there is no Hashirama Senju to subdue it. No Madara Uchiha to control it. And no Minato Namikaze to seal it." No one could speak. They couldn't find any words to say. What could they possibly say? The boy had proved that his existence was the only thing keeping Konoha safe from the Kyuubi's wrath. And now he tells them that their actions have actually caused the monster to become stronger. The shinobi felt that they had failed the village horribly and were wallowing in guilt. The civilians were sweating bullets in realization that they made an enemy out of Naruto and had caused a possible catastrophe for their livelihoods. "Well, Uzumaki-san, you have given us much to think about," and Hamiura began, but Naruto cut him off. "Don't start thinking just yet. I haven't said everything I came to say. In fact, this whole topic was brought up by your side. It's time I changed the subject to what I want it to be." The Sandaime groaned to himself inwardly. Naruto had even more to say. Wasn't it enough he just shattered every council member's ability to create a coherent thought for the next week? "I'm going to need a lot of sake and several volumes of Ika Ika after this." Sarutobi glanced at Naruto and saw him fix his kimono. Once he was done, he pulled out 2 scrolls and tossed them both to him. Sarutobi's eyes went wide as he saw that one scroll had the Fire Daimyo's insignia. This can't be good. The storage scroll first, if you will, GG, Naruto said. The Sandaime opened the scroll and released the seal on it, causing a manila envelope to appear. Throwing Naruto a quick apprehensive look, the Hokage emptied the contents of the envelope and frowned heavily at what he saw. Naruto, he said in a warning. Naruto simply ignored him and said, an official birth certificate and DNA test results to confirm that I am the son of one Kushina Uzumaki. Needless to say, the entire room was filled with hushed whispers. Sarutobi, on the other hand, was racking his brains trying to figure out how Naruto got a hold of these documents. All documents pertaining to the birth of Naruto Uzumaki and any health records were firmly secure as S-class material. Only he and the head of the Mednin had access to those files. How on earth did H? Of course. He used that blasted Sharingan of his. Oh, he and I are having a serious talk after this. That's not possible, someone said amidst the storm of whispers. Sarutobi looked up to see Mikoto Uchiha trembling with unshed tears in her eyes. You can't be, she whispered. Kushina died with her child during the Kyuubi attack. My mother did die, but not before giving birth to me, Naruto said solemnly. A sob broke through Mikoto as she put a hand to her mouth, and tears flowed from her soft onyx eyes. She just couldn't help but take in the sight of her best friend's son. Kushina had been a sister to her. Then her eyes widened as she realized something, and she said quietly to herself, if Kushina is your mother, then Mikoto! Shikaka snapped while his eyes were fixed to the floor. He then added softly, now is not the place. You knew, she asked accusingly. You knew? And you didn't tell any of us? You didn't tell me? Shikaka, you can't possibly mean, Inoichi asked as he glanced back and forth from Naruto to Shikaka. Shikaka kept his bowed and continued to stare at the floor. Dear heavens, Hayashi breathed. How could I not notice, smashed? The Gaki was a carbon copy when he was younger. Still kind of is. The civilian council had been staying quiet since the Kyuubi ordeal, but that didn't deter one pink banshee. Hokage-sama, as a member of this council I demand to know what's going on. Mikoto whirled to face Haruno and screamed, shut up, you pink-haired slut. This doesn't concern you. Any of you for that matter. How dare you, she screeched back. Enough. The Hokage's voice cut through the room, imbued with a surge of killing intent. Everyone sat straight in attention. The old man was gone, replaced by the warrior who had lived through all three shinobi wars. Mikoto, however, was not going to be discouraged. Hokage-sama, they were practically family too. This, Naruto's voice cut through, neutral and perfectly controlled. He did not meet Mikoto's gaze and simply looked forward. Is a private matter. It should be discussed and as such. Mikoto stared at the boy who was all that remained of her best friends for several moments before nodding her head and sitting down. Gigi, the other scroll if you please. Sarutobi broke the fire daimyo's seal and read the message contained there. Rereading it a few times, the Sandaime put the scroll down and put on a thoughtful face. After a few seconds, the Hokage chuckled and said, Naruto, yes? You know you would make a fine Hokage, right? Paperwork isn't really my thing, said Naruto with a hint of a real smile for the first time since entering the council chambers. Sarutobi just chuckled again. Suffice it to say, none of the council was too happy being left out of the loop, and the building suspense was killing them. Danzo least of all. How long do you intend to keep us waiting? Out with it, Sarutobi. The Sandaime merely rubbed his temples before launching into the fire daimyo's message. Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki had 2 children. 1 son and 1 daughter. The daughter married back into the Uzumaki clan and gave birth to a daughter who was Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto, being the son of Kushina, is a direct descendant of Shodaime-sama and as such is a member of the Senju clan. And seeing on how the current head and only survivor of the Senju clan, Tsunade Senju, has not been in Konoha for over 15 years, Naruto is to take her place as clan head until her return. All titles, rights and property are to be transferred over onto his name. Oh yes, and all lands and holdings the fire daimyo has had in his guardianship that belonged to Uzumaki clan until a proper heir could be found, will also be filed under Naruto's name. Naruto will from now on be known as Naruto Senju and will be granted a senior position on the Konoha Council as the Senju and Uzumaki clan heads. Giving him 2 votes on the council, I might add. Of course, all this by the order of our benevolent daimyo, Sarutobi reiterated with a smile. Everyone had their jaw on the floor. Naruto was now, officially, the wealthiest and most powerful landowner in the fire country behind the daimyo. He walked in an orphan, and now he's going to walk out the richest person in Konoha. Hiruzen, why you can't possibly be serious, Hamura spluttered. The Sandaime Hokage simply shook his head in mock apology. It's entirely airtight and legal, I'm afraid. The daimyo's seal only further reinforces it. It's completely ironclad. Nothing anyone can do. Suddenly, Haruno had an evil and hungry glint in her eye and immediately stood up. Hokage-sama. As the last Senju and Uzumaki, I move that we put Naruto-kun into CRA program. The shinobi were looking at the woman like she was crazy. 15 minutes ago she was calling for his death, now she wants to breed with him? The civilians were agreeing and nodding their heads with vigor. This was the perfect chance to finally get a hold of the virtual gold mines that were the Senju and Uzumaki holdings. Naruto, for his part, had visibly cringed, when the screeching banshee used koan with his name. He knew that they would try to pull the CRA on him, but he didn't think they would do it so soon. He expected them to approach him in a month or two, not in 5 minutes. No, Naruto said in all seriousness. I have no desire to be placed in the CRA, the banshee shrieked a response with greed plainly painted on her face. You have no choice in the matter. It's the law. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow at the useless woman. Her death will be most enjoyable once I begin Konoha's purge. I will not be 15 for another 3 years therefore. I am protected from the CRA as a minor. And another thing, you say that I have no choice in the matter? Naruto pushed out the Kyuubi's chakra and allowed his eyes to turn into black slits surrounded by crimson seas. The woman shrunk back in fear and terror and clutched her arms to her side. Need I remind you what I do for this village every second of my existence? I now also hold this village's economy in my hands. Your livelihoods as well as your lives are in my control. Do not test me. Letting the feral chakra recede, Naruto turned back and faced Mikoto Uchiha. Uchiha-san, if there is something you wish to discuss, you may come to the Senju compound tomorrow. I will happily speak with you. Now turning to face the elderly Hokage, Naruto said, Gigi, if you will excuse me. I will return when the council convenes again. Until then, I have an empire to reforge. Not waiting for an answer, Naruto turned on his heel and walked towards the doors behind him, and before he even reached the doors, he disappeared in a whirlpool of space. All the onlookers thought the same thing in that one moment. Some in dread, others in new hope. If he ever becomes Hokage, he checked his gear one last time, making sure everything was securely strapped on. Saban needles, dipped in various poisons, were wrapped around his wrists. An assortment of kunai and blades was carefully hidden in his kimono top for ease of access. He had a trench knife secured to each of his calf. He was ready. Throwing his sensory abilities, he saw that the coast was clear. He sped over the rooftops to a simple storage warehouse on the industrial side of Konoha. Focusing in on the warehouse, he could feel a very thin veil of chakra around its perimeter, a basic intruder alarm used by Chunin in the field to detect enemies enclosing on a command center for ops. In this case, it was not made to detect intruders but throw off suspicion. Any wealthy merchant could have hired shinobi to ward his warehouse against thieves. No. The real danger was the barrier in the interior of the building supported by the seals placed within the foundations. Judging by their chakra signatures and the way they were set up, they would cause the building to collapse in on itself if triggered. They would have to be deactivated and in a certain order to boot. But first, he needed to take care of the guards posted on the adjacent buildings, and then take down the seals as quick as possible. He had no idea on the timetable the guards rotated, so he had to work fast. It was a shame he did not have the chance to scout out the playing field earlier, but his target had been on the move right after the council meeting and had a habit of switching locations frequently. This was going to be a difficult run. Target was sure to be heavily guarded by unknown number of enemies. Heavy fighting to be expected and target sure to flee if situation turned disadvantageous. Various obstacles to surely be in place. Assailant identity must be kept covert. Oh, not to mention the operation was against the clock. At least I have the cover of the night. With that thought, he shined away towards the watch located on the roof opposite of him. With unrivaled agility, he pivoted on his foot as he landed and plunged a kunai in the back of the guard's head. Yanking it out, the guard went down with a spray of blood. Another body flicker resulted in the same kunai being embedded in another guard's heart. He sent a pulse of chakra, disabling the intruder ward, and quickly moved to shut down the array of seals that served keep the secrets of the warehouse from being discovered. Summoning shadow clones, he had each move over one of the seals and used them to disable the seals that held up the barrier. As he could feel the barrier come down, he dispelled his clones and quickly made his way into the building from an air vent on the roof. As he landed on the floor, he automatically swept the interior with his eyes. Finding nothing out of the ordinary, he made his way to an unmarked crate and kicked it aside to reveal a trapdoor. Another quick analysis let him know that the door had a failsafe that released poison gas if opened. In all likelihood, he deduced, the trapdoor could only be opened safely if the person's chakra signature was keyed into the seal on the other side. Still holding the kunai he used to kill the guards, he let their blood fall onto the metal lid that served as the door. Freshly taken, the blood should still have chakra residue. Taking caution, he slowly lifted the door. He dropped down into a long and empty corridor. Knowing he had little time before the next watch came to trade places with the rooftop watch, he flew through the hallway to make his way to the target. He threw out his sensory ability to find that in approximately 4 seconds, he would pass an intersection where a patrol unit of 3 was stationed. Drawing 2 more kunai, he spun them in his fingers as sped down towards the patrol. As he came around the corner, he slashed backwards as the first guard came into sight. Cold steel cleanly cleaved through carotid artery, the larynx, and then another carotid. The first of the 3 went down gurgling blood while clutching at a ripped throat. The second was quick to react, and brought down a tanto to split his head. Ducking his head, he surged forward and brought his hand back, impaling a kunai in the base of a neck. Changing his grip on the kunai, he twisted his body into the air, letting the momentum of the falling corpse carry him. A quick flick of his wrist sent a saban needle through the eye of the last obstacle. The final guard screamed as he dropped to the ground, convulsing in agony as the numerous poisons wreaked havoc in his body and set fire to his brain. Landing softly on his feet, the silent assassin glared down at the twitching body dispassionately. Humph, he scoffed. He broke back into a dash towards his target. He was close. He could sense it. 2 additional guards in a secure room up ahead along with the target. The bodyguards were of an obvious higher stock than the others he had encountered. Their chakra reserves were larger and highly developed. Releasing one of the seals on his body that stored true chakra, he put on a massive burst of speed. He was sitting at his desk putting together a team for the capture of the jinchuriki brat. The Hokage be damned, the boy had proven to be far too resourceful to be left unchecked and unleashed. He needed him under his thumb to utilize his now virtual unlimited political and financial pull. All of his carefully laid out plans would unravel if the brat ran around doing as he pleased. And most importantly, he had proven to have quite the cunning head on his shoulders. It was out of the question to allow him free rein anymore. I should have done this years ago, he thought. However, back then, the Hokage too heavily guarded the boy, and approaching him without alerting the old monkey was an impossibility. He no longer had the luxury of waiting for an opportunity. He would have to make one. As he sifted through files of personnel that were trained in Fuinjutsu, the door to this particular office of his burst open, and before he could react, the right side of his peripheral vision was lost in a spray of blood. Acting on autopilot, he drew several kunai from the inside of robes and threw them as he launched himself out of his chair. There was a blur of blonde and black as the soft thuds of the kunai hitting the wall behind him. Following the blur from the corpse of one of his most trusted lieutenants to the top corner of the room opposite of him, he gaped as he saw the QB brat crouched on the wall. In one hand he held a sheathed katana while the other was tightly wrapped around the hilt ready for a draw. He prepared to launch a fire jutsu in his direction, but he seemed to disappear. It was only a slight shift in the air that alerted him to his presence. His other lieutenant dived in front of him, as he brought a short blade to his side to block a slash. They began to exchange blows and he attempted to maneuver around his lieutenant to get to his assailant, only to be met with a hard kick to the sternum sent him flying into the wall. With a loud crack, as his back impacted stone, he landed on his feet, but weak in the knees. He looked up just in time to see his last lieutenant bisected from hip to shoulder. As blood erupted in the confined space, he had to dodge as projectiles masked in the flying gore came flying at his head. Just as he came out of the roll, he ripped the bandages of his right side to reveal a grotesque arm covered in blood-red eyes. "Arf!" Danzo cried out as in a flash of silver, his mutated arm fell, spilling blood all over the stone floor. Panting, he looked up with a hateful glare to only be met with the impossible. 2 glowing orbs of swirling black and crimson were gazing down at him. A dread whisper being the last thing he heard. Koto Amatsukami. Day after the council meeting Senju compound, Naruto stared at the piles of paper sitting on his study desk. He was going over the various finances that would be needed to pull in the resources for the plan that he had concocted with Fire Daimyo. If everything went according to plan, they should be able to run at optimal efficiency within 2.5 years. Already labor was being conscripted and the necessary landscaping had been taken care of. They could begin by the end of the month. Checking the numbers one last time, he headed out of the private study to see how his current project is going. Scores of shadow clones were moving about, restoring the compound to its former glory. The once feared and awed Senju clan had been reduced to this, a simple memory of war. At least the Uchiha clan had a few members left after Itachi's massacre. Albeit, only women and children were left, and most of the women were non-combatants. To make matters worse, all of the children were too young to be trained or in the earliest stages of their primary education, which only left one Uchiha to actually be in the academy, the Uchiha heir Sasuke. Speaking of Itachi, Danzo's files were disturbing to say the least. That he ordered one of Konoha's greatest military assets to be wiped out showed how deranged he had become. Bad enough the damage the village had suffered at the claws of that pain-in-the-ass fox, the loss of the Uchiha was a huge blow to Konoha. Naruto had to stop himself from going back and murdering the idiot. So what if the Uchiha were going to rebel? Would it really be that difficult of a thing to allow a few concessions for Fugaku's damnable pride? No matter. That threat had been neutralized. Danzo ended going from chess master to chess piece. He shook his head. He was getting distracted. Back to the matters at hand, he thought. He needed to find a way to stabilize the Senju holdings. How on earth it's possible to gamble away so much money is beyond me, he dismayed. His blasted cousin had managed to sink the Senju family treasury into the red. At least she hadn't managed to lose any properties. Luckily for him, the Fire Daimyo had kept the Uzumaki holdings thriving with various investments off the accumulated interest. He had no luck here. The Senju were practically bankrupt, and now that he was head, several debtors were soon going to be knocking on his door. To them it was obvious that a 12 going on 13-year-old would be easier to bully than a Sannin with a rather short and violent temper. When I get my hands on that woman, I'm going to throttle her. The look of savage glee on Naruto's face caused several of the shadow clones to look at him with caution. They slowly began inching away toward the more unoccupied portions of the compound. Again, Naruto shook his head. He needed to figure out a way out of this and fast. He could funnel money from the Uzumaki accounts into the Senju, but the strain it would put would set back his current plans by at least 6 months. He didn't have that kind of time. IWA was still hostile, Kumo and Suna were quickly building up military power, and Mizu was in the middle of a civil war. Not to mention the rumors coming out of AIM and Oto were disturbing to say the least. War was on the horizon and he didn't have the luxury of time. He needed to find another source of income and quick. I suppose setting up a few dummy businesses to smuggle black market goods and weapons would work, he mused. Yes, it would work. He could use Root's resources to set up a supplier, but the question is, where? Selling out of the Fire Country is folly. No need to arouse suspicion. Kusa, he decided. The place is perfectly situated to sell to both IWA and AIM, and current diplomatic situations with Kusa are tense to say the least. This way no one would suspect a Konoha-based supplier. It was a solid idea. The best part was that with Danzo's network, he could make it look like it was an independent weapons cartel instead of a military-funded operation in case things went south. As Naruto was silently congratulating himself, his senses flared as the wards he had put earlier this morning told him that someone had entered the compound. He let out his sensory abilities to find that the intruder had come through the front gates. Probably not an intruder in that case, he rationalized. Getting a lock on the chakra signature, he recognized it as the Uchiha matriarch, Mikoto Uchiha. Damn, I suppose I did invite her for a conversation. Time to ready myself for the storm of female hormones and sentimentality, he sighed to himself. He quickly ordered a few shadow clones to prepare tea and some few foods to be taken with it. He had the foresight to gather a few pleasantries for conversation when he realized he would spend the next few weeks catering to clan heads, local nobles and the ever-opportunistic businessmen. He sent another shadow clone to lead her to the center of the compound, the only portion that was furnished for a polite meeting. He went back into his study to put away the various documents, and placed several strong seals to bar entry to any save him. While he doubted any would try to sneak in with a virtual army of clones jumping about, not to mention get through the barrier he had set up, paranoia is a ninja's best friend. He paused for a moment, and resolved to set a small shrine for Mito Uzumaki somewhere in the compound. Her scrolls on Fuinjutsu proved to be invaluable and certainly helped a great deal with his initial training in Hashirama's and Madara's compound. As he walked towards the sitting room where Mikoto had been led to, he pondered over his current state of affairs. Things were moving fast. The next couple of years would prove to be critical to the return of Konoha as the world's dominant power. He slid the door open to where Mikoto was seated and saw that she was nervously staring at her hands in her lap. Yet, when he entered, she sharply looked up and he could see the sense of relief that eased its way onto her face as well as the notable sorrow that misted over eyes. As he beheld her, Naruto saw that, for a woman her age, she had no noticeable wrinkles. No doubt due to the effects of her strong chakra, a testament to her clan genetics as well as her own prowess as a shinobi. She had a round face along with the soft delicate chin that was so common in the Uchiha. Her eyes were hawk-like yet a soft velvet black that shone together with her smooth raven black hair, though it was there. The touch of time accentuated through survival of tragedy and grief. Yet, it did little to deter her attractiveness. In fact, it only enhanced it. All in all, Mikoto Uchiha was an incredibly gorgeous woman. It's a shame she has some 20-odd years on me, Naruto silently sighed. As she slowly rose and Naruto beheld her figure as well, he decided that the Uchiha are nature's way of making the rest of the human race feel bad. Gifted with both prowess on the battlefield of both war and love, they must have been the cause of many a tragedy. He silently mused on following his no-good godfather's footsteps and writing a tale of loss and passion based on the Uchiha clan. Of course, he quickly dismissed the thought. He had a world to subjugate to his rule after all. Uchiha Dano, he said with a deep nod of his head accompanied by a small smile. It is a pleasure to have you grace my home. Oh no, it's my pleasure to be here, she said with a respectful bow. Despite their age difference, he outranked as the head of two ancient clans, regardless of their fall from grace. Though he contemplated if the situation was of different circumstances, she wouldn't have bowed to him, rather have responded with a polite nod. Uchiha have nothing if not their pride after all. As she retook her seat, he settled opposite of the sofa she was on in a large comfortable chair. A silence soon overtook the room as he was content to let her take lead of the conversation. However, she was so lost in her thoughts on what to say to him, that she fell back to looking at her hands that had settled onto her lap. Realizing that she was feeling uncomfortable on initiating the conversation, when it was her that desired to speak with him, he resolved to speak up. Speaking softly and slowly, as to not come off sounding strong and demanding, he asked, "You knew my parents?" Mikoto looked up from her hand, surprised as she was wrenched from her thoughts. Though, it slowly morphed into sad smile. She nodded her head and smiled a little more widely. "The three of us," she spoke. "We went to the academy together. Same year, same class. We even ended up on the same genin squad." Here she laughed, in an obvious reverie. She leaned forward in her seat, settling her elbows on her knees. Very unladylike behavior for a clan head, but Naruto brushed it aside as she was quite clearly happy to speak about her childhood friends. He wondered whether or not she ever spoke about them before to anyone else. Losing your closest comrades on the same night, having to live through her family being butchered at the hands of her own firstborn, She must be a psychological mess. It was quite the scandal, you know. Genin teams are always 2 males, 1 female. For it to be reversed was, what did they call it? Oh yes. An affront to our time-honored traditions. Never mind the fact that Kushina and I belong to the clans that began the tradition. You were close then? He asked, shifting in his chair. Very. Kushina and I grew up together playing in this very compound as well as the Uchiha one. Mito-sama was very open and invited all the children of Konoha to play in her garden. Even though I was an Uchiha and she was the Senju matriarch, she had no problem with me being here and spending time with her granddaughter. Again, she began to laugh at another memory and tried to stifle her laughter behind her hands. Naidame-sama never liked it when we came over to play. He always grumbled about stupid brats ruining my koi pond. It was always amusing to watch Mito-sama put him in his place. One glare from her, and he would melt into a puddle. There were tears in her eyes now, but she continued to smile and persevere. I remember this one time he was gazing at his koi fish when Kushina and I pushed him into the water. He was so upset that he chased us all around the compound. We ran into Mito-sama's private quarters to hide and he barged in right behind us. Unfortunately for him, she was getting prepared for a banquet and was in the middle of changing. She hit him so hard that he actually went through several houses before landing back in his precious pond. Even Naruto had to control his laughter at hearing this. He couldn't help but feel just a little smug on Madara's behalf. Madara and Tobirama always argued with one another, and Naruto knew from Madara's memories that Mito Uzumaki was a force to be reckoned with. It was never strictly stated, but everyone who met the woman was deathly afraid of her. Another silence settled over them as Mikoto was lost in her thoughts while Naruto sifted through Madara's memories. As the silence dragged on, the door slid open to reveal a clone carrying in a tray of tea and assortment of snacks. It left it on the small table between the two of them. Naruto maneuvered himself across the table and bent over to pick up the pot. Tea, he asked, as began to pour 1 cup for himself. Yes, please, she said with a small smile. Naruto poured her a cup as well and handed it to her. Accepting it with a grateful smile, she took a biscuit off the plate that he offered it to her from. Naruto settled down beside her as he drank his own cup. After a few sips, he turned his head to look over at her. Were you close to my father as well? Here she looked at him hard and he could see her eyes sweep over his face. He was greatly interested by the obvious longing on her face. You really are Minato's son, aren't you? I believe that was evident by the fact of his marriage to my mother. She gave a small laugh, although there almost no mirth in it. It was an empty laugh. A conclusion reached him, and he decided to test it out. He twisted his body on the couch so that he entirely facing her. Did the two of you play in your youth often? She nodded slowly and got this faraway look in her eye. I met him before Kushina did. Wandering the streets of Konoha one day during the New Year's festival. He was such a sweet boy, she sighed. So quiet but full of smiles. He could light up a room with one of those smiles. He had the softest hair of any boy I knew, and it was such a beautiful golden blonde color. And then his eyes. His stunning blue eyes. Girls used to get lost in his eyes. As she was lost in her memories, Naruto had to suppress a predatory smile. Due to his past, he had little interaction with people, but he could unravel them easier than a Biki down at the TNI building. You loved him. It wasn't an accusation. Simply a stated fact. Like how someone would say it's raining. She looked at him with shock and quickly averted her gaze as his words sank in. She looked at the floor with something akin to shame, and even a little regret. She looked at him again, this time her eyes pleading. You have to understand, I loved Fugaku, I really did. But ours was an arranged marriage. I was barely 19. Minato was the only man who was really close to me in my life at the time. We were very close and I used to entertain thoughts of having a family with. At this point she was openly crying and Naruto hoped she would stop soon. Her tears were staining the upholstery. The furniture was antique, for crying out loud. After our marriage I left the force and settled down. I grew to love a stranger, and soon enough Itachi was born. She sobbed at the mention of her wayward son and her grip on the teacup hardened. He really hoped she wouldn't end up shattering it. He was rather fond of the blue floral patterns. You have his eyes, you know? That same sapphire blue. Yes, I suppose I do. Your point being? She raised her hand and placed her hand on his cheek. She slowly began to caress his skin with her thumb. You even look a lot like him. Oh dear. This is not going where I wanted it to. I need to defuse the situation. It's strange though, she said with a slight confused look. You seem almost Uchiha with some of your features. And out. He gently grabbed her hand and brought it down. Not wanting to startle or upset her. He looked her dead in the eye, his face impassive and a glare which would have frozen a rampaging dragon in its tracks. Can you keep a secret? A secret, she said, slightly disappointed at the sudden turn of the conversation. It's a secret my father never told anyone, including my mother. Though seeing it is your clan, I suppose you deserve to know. And my clan? What does this have to do with the Uchiha? Her words dying in her throat as understanding settled. No, she whispered incredulously. Naruto nodded as he said, my grandfather. But how? There would have been records. The clan would never let a child go. Breaking eye contact with her, Naruto looked over to the clock and stood up. It is getting late. Perhaps we could finish this another time, Mikoto looked like she wanted to do nothing but finish the conversation now, but Naruto flashed her one cold smile that brought shivers to her spine. You're right, it's been a long day. She got up and turned around to leave, but tentatively turned back around. I have a son who is your age. You should come by the Uchiha district and meet him. I'm sure you'd get along great. You could even stay for dinner. I'm sure it can get lonely with nothing but clones to talk to. His smile still in place, Naruto said, I'll be glad to. She hesitantly leaned down and brushed her lips across his temple before abruptly turning and quickly making her way out. He stood there for a few moments pondering over the last hour before making his way back to his study. It's been quite the eventful day, he reflected. I've found a way around my money problems, learned my pseudo-aunt was in love with my father and is projecting her feelings for him onto me, and I let out a secret that could potentially cause a public upheaval if let out. Oh yes, let us not forget the interlopers that attempted to sneak in during my conversation with Mikoto. Off to interrogation, Naruto turned on his heels as he headed to where his clones had stored the would-be assassins. Really, did the idiots on the council not realize what would happen if he died? Everything would be transferred over to his next of kin. Tsunade. The entire country would be on the brink of economic crisis in a matter of days. He gave a quick shudder at the thought of all his carefully laid out plans being undone by that drunk. 2 years later, it was early morning and the classroom had yet to fill. There were already several taken-up seats, and only a few of them were empty. It was the final day of the year, and the last day for this particular class. They were the graduating year. They would soon be entering the Konoha Shinobi Corps as genin, those of them that passed the genin exams anyhow. Yet there were high hopes for this year's crop. Almost every one of Konoha's major clans had an heir in this class. They were the hope of the future of this village. A class like this hadn't been seen in over 20 years. Some were speculating that the new generation of the Sannin would be amongst them. Many were even taking bets as to which would eventually become Hokage. Several of the teachers were predicting which of their pupils would be the fastest to rise through the ranks. Of course, all of the people in power knew that he would be arriving with them. All of them were fervently praying that their children would end up on the same team as him. To build friendships and cultivate alliances, such was the politics of the shinobi clans. Fathers attempting to get him to notice their daughters, wives angling to endear their homes to him. They all knew the political landscape was changing. Power had shifted significantly in the past 2 years. Other nations had taken notice how Fire Country, which had become complacent in peace, was now boasting the largest economic power in the world. And it was all due to the young man that walked into that classroom that moment. A young man clad in a pure white yukata with dark blue thorn patterns adorning it. A young man with long pale blonde hair, deep black at the roots, which was loosely tied in a ponytail that hung over his shoulder, hair that seemed to shimmer as the sunlight played off it and reflected off his pale white skin. The female teenagers all became short of breath as he turned his sapphire eyes, layered in ice, onto them. Each of them approaching hyperventilation as his gaze settled on them, one by one. The boys noting the authoritative presence he exuberated and his cold and empty expression that adorned his angelical features. Eventually his glacial eyes settled on one raven black-haired young man. The boy in question had locked gazes with the unearthly visitor to the classroom, and all the others grew tense as the very air seemed to grow cold and heavy. A respectful nod from the visitor followed by a simple greeting broke the palpable tension. Uchiha. Reciprocating the gesture, the raven-haired youth replied, Senju. The visitor moved and sat down next to the brooding dark-haired boy. He pulled out a scroll that he began to read and pointedly ignored all the others. Whispers broke out amongst the classroom populace, the various students wondering what it meant that the unofficial king of the year proclaimed the stranger a Senju. The only ones not speaking to one another were the clan heirs. They were looking at each one another, having been told by their parents that the significant player in Konoha's system was due to make an appearance. Of course, the speculations of others were broken by the banging of the door being thrown wide open. 2 girls rushed in, panting. Ha! I win Ino Pig, in your dreams, billboard brow. My foot was through the door first. Was not, was too. Stop lying, you're just trying to cheat your way next to Sasuke-kun. Who are you calling a cheat? And besides, Sasuke-kun would never want to sit next to you. Both girls were obviously so engrossed in their argument as they made their way to the seat next to Sasuke that they hadn't realized that said seat was already occupied. Naruto, for his part, was doing his best to ignore the 2 screaming girls, while simultaneously trying to keep himself from laughing from Sasuke's obvious yet well-hidden embarrassment. It was obvious to him, but his Uchiha friend managed to hide from the rest quite successfully. The 2 girls continued their argument, and it was growing continuously more difficult to ignore them. Without meaning to, Naruto began to exude a minuscule of murderous aura. The blonde one is Inoichi's daughter. I've met her a few times when I was invited over to his place. As for the other, I can't put my finger on it, but something tells me she needs to die. Oh well. I'll save murder for another day. Look, Ino Pig, hey. Who the hell are you? There were several sharp intakes as one of the girls so rudely addressed the boy who so openly radiated power. All the clan heirs were inwardly groaning and hoping to avoid a murder on their last day. Well, all the heirs except one dark-haired one who was enthusiastically praying that that would be the case. Eep. Naruto-sama! What are you doing here? Naruto looked up from his scroll and leveled Ino with a glare. The girl blushed furiously upon meeting his eyes. Hello, Ino. It's good to see you again. I must say, you keep rather interesting company. The girlie turned red as a tomato in embarrassment. Recognizing admonishment for her behavior, Naruto, the other girl said as if trying to remember something. As she said his name, Naruto, properly looking at her for the first time, realized she had pink hair. Realization hit him. She dies first chance I can set up an accident. Yeah, you're that loser kid from a few years back. Didn't you get kicked out of the academy? What are you doing here? Naruto gazed a glare at the girl that, had she not been so completely brainwashed by her mother, would have shut her up. Unfortunately, Naruto, for the last 2 years, had slowly stripped the civilian council of its power, restoring Konoha to purely military rule. The civilian portion of the council being more of a ceremonial role now, whose main concern was centered around naming streets and setting up children playgrounds. Thus Sakura's family had lost much of its prestige and wealth that her mother built up. Wanting her previous way of life back, she became obsessed with the Uchiha heir. Young, handsome, wealthy and of obvious ability, he was going places, so she, in her delusions of grandeur, decided to fall madly in love with him. He on the other hand views her as a nuisance and a bug he cannot crush under his boot due to a minor technicality called the law. Sakura! Shut up, Ino said frantically. Oh come on, Ino. He's just some loser. A loser who's ruining my Sasuke-kun's image. Get away from him, loser! Ino shouted incredulously at Sakura. Shut up right now, Sakura. Turning to Naruto, she began bowing and apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, Naruto-sama. She doesn't know about the ways of the clans. Please forgive her. Sakura looked at her friend like she had grown a second head. What are you going on about, Ino, and what's with all this Sama stuff? This is that orphan nobody from a few years ago. You remember the total loser and loner? Ino had enough at this point and pointedly smacked Sakura across the face hard. The girl was fuming and looked ready to start a fight. What the hell, I know, pig. What was that for? You idiot! That's Naruto Senju. He's a direct descendant of Shodame-sama. He's also the youngest person to hold a seat on the Konoha ruling council. Not only that, but there are rumors that he's a prodigy that hasn't been seen like since the Yondaime. Sakura let the words sink in carefully. She really screwed up big time. Your Sasuke-kun, you say? Sakura turned towards the voice that spoke only to see it was the individual that she had been insulting and belittling the whole time. You said you're Sasuke-kun? Why on earth would he want to be with you? What? She asked confused. I've done my research. Sakura Haruno, aged 14. Has no outstanding ability save for being able to memorize text quickly. Subpar skills on practical exams and a chakra reserve barely above that of a civilian's. What would make Sasuke even look twice at you? However, Naruto didn't pause his onslaught. You come from no significant background, have no affiliations to any clans, nor do you even possess a great wealth. You're ugly to boot. Who would ever love you? The girl was now crying in silent humiliation. Not being able to look away from Naruto, who had found a sudden interest in his nails. Really, clanless trash like you should know your place. Yes, Sakura, a girl in the back who had been bullied in the past by Sakura spoke up. Who do you think you are? With her outburst, it seemed the dam had broken and several of her classmates who had taken her verbal abuse over the years had begun hurling insults and cries of indignation. Sakura, no longer able to bear the shame and scorn, left the room sobbing hysterically. Ino, not even bothering trying to follow and comfort her friend, apologized one last time to Naruto before taking a seat. Sasuke, next to him, was giving the signature Uchiha smirk and look of what seemed to be gratefulness. As Naruto gave a nod of acknowledgement in his direction, the instructor walked in. Hopefully, Naruto thought merrily. She'll kill herself and saves me the trouble. As his most trusted and capable soldiers stood before, Sarutobi gazed upon them with pride. They would be entrusted with the future of the village. The young would be admitted into the shinobi corps by their hands. Looking at each of their faces, he mentally congratulated himself for picking out the students that each jonin would be able to bring out the best from. Well, not every student, he thought. Despite his moniker, he was no god and he could only work with what he was given. All right, he said. Let's get down to business. All of the jonin ceased talking and stood at attention. He inwardly smiled to himself. Order, discipline and respect, that's how the hierarchy in Konoha was built. The chain of command was direct with no possible circumventions. As of now we have 4 teams that passed the most recent Chunin exams. Meaning, teams 5, 7, 8, and 10 are to be recycled. We have a decent crop this year and I want all of you to put in a good amount of effort. Am I clear? Hi, Hokage-sama. Several voices chorused at once. These are the team placements. Team 5 will be led by Genma Shiranui. Your genin will be generic genin number 1, Sakura Haruno, and generic genin number 2. Genma approached the Hokage's desk and picked up the files on his new students. As he walked back to his place, he flipped through the files and took on a dejected look. A fangirl, he groaned. Sarutobi smiled and looked at Kakashi. Kakashi Hatake, you will take Team 7. Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga, and Shino Aburame. Kakashi began to splutter. What? Hokage-sama, I wreck. I know, the old Hokage interrupted. But you sigh. I lied, he interjected smoothly. That's completely acceptable in a profession like ours. Kakashi simply hung his head completely in defeat. His Hokage just steamrolled him. Ignoring Kakashi's bout of depression, Sarutobi continued, Team 8 will be led by Kurenai Yuhi. Your genin will be Sasuke Uchiha, Yakumo Kurama and Naruto Senju. Several whispers began to break out. The newbie Jonin was getting the two most talked about genin, both who were heirs to Konoha's founding families. A Hokage-sama? Sarutobi turned his head to see that his son had spoken up. Yes, Asuma? Do you think it wise to put a Senju and an Uchiha on the same team? Will they be able to work together? Kurenai will have a civil war on her hands. Not to worry, he smiled back. The Senju/Uchiha rivalry still flourishes, but it is considerably diminished. At most they will resort to friendly competition. I don't think you'll have to deal with homicidal interteam relations. He added that last bit while looking at Kurenai, who simply sweat dropped. Now, as for Team 10, Asuma Sarutobi will be the Jonin team leader of this generation's Ino Shikacho trio. He then went on to give the other Jonin their students, and soon dismissed everyone save for Kakashi, Kurenai and Asuma. You three all have specialized teams, as all 9 of your genin are clan heirs. They all nodded in affirmative, and he continued his orders. Kakashi, your team was developed with a tracking team in mind. Given your ANBU history and choice of summons, you were the obvious instructor to pick for this team. It's why your request was denied. No need to look depressed. I'm sure you can get to know the boy on your own time. Kakashi nodded solemnly. He really wanted to train his sensei's son, just to repay what he owed to both father and son, even if just a little. Asuma, Team 10's role will be one of scouting and reconnaissance. Your time with the Ninja Guardians gave you a familiarity with various countries and their terrain. Train your team well because they will be the ones sent out prior to major operations. Asuma gave a grim but resolute nod. He didn't like the idea of kids getting sent into heavy fighting, but such was the reality of war. Kurenai, you're one of the village's top genjutsu experts. All of your genin are well versed in the use of genjutsu. Therefore, they will play the role of a team specialized in stealth, infiltration as well as assassination. Kurenai had to swallow the lump that had formed when she learned that 2 of the most influential clans were going to have their heirs placed under instruction. Now it came back even bigger. Her team was to be a team of highly efficient killers. However, a question formed in her mind. Hokage-sama, I was under the impression that people of Senju-san's condition were generally horrible at genjutsu. The old man gave a small smile to her. You will find Naruto to be full of surprises. Ah, I see. You all have your orders. Dismissed. All 3 of them smartly saluted and quickly left, leaving Sarutobi to his thoughts. Poor girl, she's going to have to deal with the second coming of Hashirama-sensei and Madara. Kurenai Yuhi was a young, beautiful, and freshly made jonin. She had been promoted little over 6 months ago, and had been saddled with the responsibility of a genin team. Though she welcomed the challenge, she wanted to prove to her peers and superiors that she was more than a pair of gorgeous legs with a pretty face. She welcomed the challenge of raising a genin team. She was prepared for the trials and hardships they she have to endure. However, she wasn't ready for this. She was staring into the face of Yakumo Kurama, who was blushing furiously. Kurenai had been ecstatic to be working with Yakumo again. She had helped the girl in controlling her powers when she was younger, and had developed a bond with her, and the Kurama clan was famous for their ability in genjutsu. The reason for the girl's blush, however, was her 2 teammates on either side of her. Kurenai had kept up an aloof and professional attitude to keep away all the men and perverts that would leer at her or try to flirt with her, which had led to her being dubbed the Ice Queen of Konoha. These 2 boys, however, gave a whole new meaning to the word ice. Both of them sat stationary and impassive. Both were dressed in elegant yukatas, the Uchiha in a silky dark navy blue while the Senju in a white one with deep blue thorn-like patterns. Rather than shinobi, they looked like young and sophisticated lords. Nevertheless, Kurenai was not deceived. They radiated a deadly presence, and were paying attention to every detail around them. She had the sudden mental images of a jungle cats. Lithe, agile and lethal, these 2 predators, and would kill without a second thought. Her last thought, that she heavily berated herself for, before she tried to speak, was that both boys were exceedingly handsome. Beautiful even, in a sense, so I thought we could get to know each other and do introductions, she supplied helpfully in order to break the uncomfortable silence. After collecting her team from the academy, she thought it would be best to bond with them and figured taking them out to lunch would be a good idea. She had taken them to a local ramen restaurant that had opened up a year ago and had grown quickly popular. She thought a nice casual background would help ease the shyness of a first meeting. Now she was really rethinking her idea. The 2 young men probably were used to the highest quality of food and being waited on hand and foot. She just hoped this wouldn't turn into a fiasco. Introductions, the Uchiha asked as he raised a thin eyebrow. Kurenai knew she was being ridiculous, but she couldn't help but feel jealous of Uchiha's delicate features. How pathetic, envying a 14-year-old boy. You know, she said, rolling her hand. Likes, dislikes, dreams and hobbies. The boys looked at each other, an innocent enough gesture, but Kurenai noticed something pass between them as they locked gazes. They were used to each other's presence, she concluded, if they can wordlessly communicate with each other like that. Internally, she let out a sigh of relief. No need to worry about clan rivalries resulting in murder then. I'll set the example, I guess. My name is Kurenai Yuhi. I like cake, creating new genjutsu and strong sake. I dislike chauvinistic pigs and perverts. She said this with a little too much vehemence. My dream is to be recognized throughout the elemental nations for my use of genjutsu, and my hobby is going out with friends for drinks in the evening. She instantly regretted that last part as all three were giving her scrutinizing looks. Oh no, they must think me some drunk, HN, the Uchiha grunted. Sasuke Uchiha? I like training and fighting the strong. I hate fangirls. Don't have any hobbies and I will see my clan restored to its former glory. Well, that wasn't so bad, Kurenai thought. I'm Yakumo Kurama, the brown-haired girl declared proudly. She sure was quite a countenance to the two quiet and serious-looking boys. I like exploring new possibilities with genjutsu, so I guess we have something in common. I don't really have any big dislikes. Hobbies would be tending to a small garden I keep, and my dream is also to have my clan restored to its former prominence. Kurenai noted how Sasuke gave Yakumo a nod of respect and possible sympathy. She then turned to the final team member. I am Naruto Senju. I like gaining new knowledge and engaging with the powerful. I loathe the incompetent and greedy. My hobbies include reading and chakra research. My dream is also to restore my clan along with realizing the dreams of my ancestors. Well, looks like you three all have similar goals, she said, smiling. Perfect, they can all bond over their shared goals. As they settled and began to order their food, Yakumo brought up a few topics on genjutsu with her. After a few minutes, the male members of their team also began to voice their opinions on genjutsu theory and possible applications in the practical. She knew that Yakumo would be a natural genius with genjutsu and its inner workings, but she was pleasantly surprised that the other two were well versed in its theory. She supposed that Sasuke, with his Sharingan, would have an expert understanding, but was startled by Naruto's immense knowledge in the field. He spoke like a master on the subject. As their lunch wore on, they didn't really get to know each other on a personal level but had managed to grow comfortable with one another. As they rose to leave, Kurenai took out a small purse to pay the bill, but Naruto stopped her. There's no need to pay, he said almost absent-mindedly. Of course there is. He's not thinking it's okay for shinobi to dine and dash, is he? Consider it on the house, he said before he sunshined away. Kurenai could only stare dumbly at the empty space Naruto previously had occupied. What does he mean it's on the house? Sasuke was walking away from them but turned around at his new sensei's question. Smirking at her, he said, he means that as the owner of this restaurant that his sensei doesn't have to pay here. He then walked out and disappeared with a shunshin of his own, leaving a dumbfounded Kurenai. Yakumo, on the other hand, was wondering if the same courtesy applied to her. The food was rather delicious. Naruto sat up in bed, leaning against the headboard as his body glistened in sweat. He was breathing somewhat heavily. He glanced out of the window to see the moon radiating waves of pale light that fell onto the covers that hid his lower body. As his gaze continued to be transfixed, his eyes slowly morphed into glowing orbs of crimson. It was a curious sight. His pale blonde hair with black beginnings, cascading over his shoulders and onto his chest, being illuminated by the feeble radiance of the moon. It made him seem less human. Ethereal even, and as his thoughts continued to spiral, spurred on by the veil of eldritch sheen, again, his eyes shifted. They churned as black and red fought for dominance, twisting form and shape. Finally settling into twin galaxies made up of thousands of minuscule crimson suns, and where once his face was impassive and his eyes seemingly thoughtful, they shifted into a barely noticeable shroud of hunger and desire. Yet, as quick as the change occurred, it disappeared. His features, settling back into cold stone and aloofness. Naruto turned his head to the figure in the bed next to him. Softly curled into his side, the long silk of raven hair had slowly inched itself onto his lap ever since it had fallen asleep. He picked up a lock of hair between his forefinger and thumb and rubbed it. Letting it back down, he gently brushed the hair aside, revealing a thin neck of soft, creamy skin. How fragile, he mused as he drew a line across the neck with a finger. His touch must have been cold because the figure gave a small shudder and a slight moan of discomfort. As the strands of raven silk snuggled deeper into his abdomen, an arm wrapped across his waist in an attempt to draw in the source of warmth to the body attached. Mikoto Uchiha had proven to be a pleasant distraction over the last 2.5 years. He initially had no desire to pursue a relationship with her, but as he used the emotions she held for his father that she projected onto him to get closer to her son, he had actually found her to be pleasant company. And a pleasurable partner, though he had made it clear that there was no permanent arrangement between them. She had understood and accepted this, as there was no true way they could overcome the age gap between them. It was of course an entire secret from the rest of the world. For one, Sasuke would have a meltdown and call for bloody murder, not to mention two clan heads having illicit relations with one another was highly frowned upon. Especially when one clan head had suffered through the decimation of her clan at the hands of her son, possibly leaving her psychologically damaged, while the other clan head is the only member of his clan and still a minor in the legal sense. Well, not anymore. As soon as one becomes a shinobi of the village, They are fully capable of being tried as an adult in the courts of the Land of Fire. His thoughts then shifted to his own mental conditioning. He deliberated in his mind whether or not his attraction towards older women came from the absence of a mother figure in his life. Madara, also, had little to no memories of his mother, as she had died soon after giving birth to Izuna. Both he and Madara had grown up in a strong military environment with powerful male figures for role models. Giving himself a dry chuckle, Naruto banished such thoughts from his mind. He considered himself mentally stable, but was he sane? No. Naruto highly doubted that any in the profession of the shadows were sane. They had been trained since a young age to be combatants and killers. They dealt in death. There are no poets in the bitter business, he thought to himself. He looked back down into his lap at Mikoto and caressed her cheek with his thumb. A sigh of content escaped her as her lips slowly twitched into a small smile. She must have really loved him. His thoughts drifted towards his new team, and the past couple of weeks since its formation. Of course, he had a rather large hand in how the teams had been formed. He was the one who suggested organizing the new genin teams into task-specific groups. It was ridiculous grouping together genin so the teams were balanced in terms of strength. The jonin senseis would have to spend too much time bringing everyone on their squad to an equal level. A team is only as strong as its weakest link after all. Yes, he had been rather proud of managing to change that piece of idiocy into military efficiency, and was highly pleased with his team. Sasuke and he had struck up a close friendship, especially after he revealed his ties to the Uchiha clan. They had gotten along great, and he had helped train him into a highly efficient and capable shinobi. Kurama had come from a clan whose proficiency with genjutsu surpassed even the Uchiha, and had been renowned since the Warring Clans era. However, the Second Shinobi World War had seen their numbers dwindled after the massacres in the battlefields in the Land of Rain at the hands of Hanzo, though he always got a kick out of their clan name. The damn fox had demanded their systemic annihilation upon learning their existence. It couldn't stand the fact that insignificant humans dared to presume to use its glorious name. He wondered whether all the Bijou were as prideful and conceited as the Kyuubi, or if he was the only exception. His Jonin sensei, on the other hand, wasn't really anything special in terms of the more powerful shinobi. Granted, her strength in genjutsu was phenomenal, but anyone who had above-average control of her chakra or mastered the Sharingan could easily neutralize her. He had taken a look into her file. Being on the council has its perks, and found that she was a run-of-the-mill Jonin. She graduated at the normal age, made Chunin after 4 years of being a genin, and spent 5 years before being promoted to Jonin, though he had to admit, she was exceptionally beautiful. Her dark chocolate-colored hair falling onto her back in a wave and gorgeous red eyes turned a lot of heads. And the professional detachment she always kept along with her sharp hawk-like features brought in a lot of attention that Naruto deduced that she despised. I suppose I do feel attracted to older women. Again, as his chest quivered in amusement, he sent away his thoughts and focused in on the direction he wanted to take his team: infiltration and assassination. They had been going over drills and teamwork building exercises. There was little for them to learn in terms of actual combat from Kurenai at the moment, as Naruto had made sure that the Shinobi Council had put together a new curriculum for the academy. Making sure that the grading scale was 2/3 practical and 1/3 theory ensured graduates would actually be proficient out in the field rather than try to think up an answer from a textbook in a deadly scenario. I suppose I should get some sleep. C-rank mission tomorrow after all. Another thing he had pushed for and gotten past. Academy students would be placed on rotating teams and taken out on the weekends by Chunins for D-rank missions. This would help build up the necessary mentality of teamwork as well as reduce the numerous amount of D-rank missions that piled up. It was good for the students as well as for Konoha's academy. Naruto let out a silent sigh as he slipped down onto his back. Mikoto groaned in protest in her sleep but quickly quieted down after he pulled her to his chest and wrapped his arms around her. As he let his chakra recede from his eyes, he gave himself to the darkness and the lull of sleep. Yakumo was anxious. She didn't let it show, but she was. Her teammates stood at either side of her, and they didn't seem to be troubled at all, and she knew, unlike her, they weren't acting. Naruto and Sasuke probably wouldn't freak out even if war was suddenly declared. They'd take it in stride without blinking. But this was their first mission. It was C-rank to boot. C-rank meant there was definite or possible probability of confrontations, though non-shinobi ones. She knew that there would be no serious danger, but who really knew? Although, with the Jonin on their team there was little to worry about. Of course Sasuke and Naruto were nothing to laugh at either, and her genjutsu abilities were probably in the mid to high Chunin range. They would be higher if it weren't for the fact that her full powers were under a seal because she couldn't completely control them yet. Sasuke was the rookie of the year and graduated with the highest grades not seen in over 10 years. Not since his brother anyways. As for Naruto, well, she really had no idea how strong he was, but from what she's seen from their training sessions so far and how the Uchiha seemed to defer to him, she knew his abilities weren't anything to scoff at. Honestly, thinking about her teammates made her realize how lucky she had gotten in the team selections. Despite their unapproachable aura that they projected, both boys were actually very nice. They were quiet and prone to fall into silence, but they were very polite and always considerate. Not to mention exceedingly handsome. She had to admit, she had had a crush on Sasuke back in their academy days but never fawned all over him like some of the other female students. No, she had taken her studies seriously for the sake of her clan. Although some of those fangirls are beginning to scare me, she thought warily to herself. A few days ago, after training, Naruto had invited Sasuke and her to go back to the restaurant they had visited with Kurenai-sensei for lunch. Apparently it was recently opened and had gained quite a bit of popularity. The chef Tucci and his daughter Ayam ran the business while Naruto actually owned it. She remembered when she had sat down at a table with her teammates, she felt the stares of open jealousy from all the female patrons. Stare is actually too nice of a word. It was more like seething glares of death. It had gotten so bad that Sasuke had to actually let loose some killer intent for them to leave them alone. The biggest surprise, though, was when she had discreetly thanked him and he had smiled in return. Smiled. For the longest time she had thought that the Uchiha were genetically predisposed to be unable to smile. She was shaken out of her reverie when she heard Kurenai-sensei, who was standing in front of them, speak. Teammate reporting in for a mission, Hokage-sama. Yakumo took a look at the elderly man sitting at the mission's desk in front of them. She had never actually been this close to the Hokage before except for one time when he had come into the academy to visit the students and lecture them on the importance of village unity and the will of fire. Ah yes, the old Hokage said after taking a long puff from his pie. First mission, I believe? At his question they all nod. Now I believe Kurenai has debriefed you on the nature of your team and its primary function as a unit? Once he received 3 affirmatives he began searching for a suitable mission. C rank, normally one this level would be given to a more seasoned team or even a chunin, but I think you can handle it. Listen up, civilian Akira Moshi is wanted in the capital for numerous felonies. He has eluded capture and scouts report that he is currently hiding in the town of Akajima. He is to be put to death for his crimes. Your orders are to locate the target and eliminate him. Dismissed. As Naruto observed the small town from the safe house set up from the local, he admired the sea of red trees surrounding it. The trees were forever frozen in the colors of autumn. Hashirama Senju had noted the beauty of the trees years ago, and had done something using his fabled Mokutan to preserve the crimson leaves throughout all seasons. It angered Naruto that such beauty was being marred by the presence of a vile criminal. The old man had given them the mission scroll with all the details, and what he found sickened him. The man was wanted for the murders and rape of 6 young women. Naruto considered himself ruthless and without mercy, but he had honor. He would never condone such crimes and was in full mind to find and kill this sick bastard. Sasuke was of similar mentality. After the massacre, there were mainly non-combatant females left in his clan, and there were many a group that wanted to take advantage of that and breed their own private army of Sharingan holders. The old man got put his foot down, for once, and vehemently denied any attempts to steal or use the Sharingan for any purpose. Of course people still tried and there were more than a few kidnapping attempts. Fortunately ABU managed to keep the Uchiha safe and thwart any plots. However, this had left Sasuke with a fierce protectiveness towards his family and women in general. Even if he spent the majority of his academy years avoiding fangirls. As for Kurenai-sensei and Yakumo, well, Naruto and Sasuke were giving the 2 young beauties a wide berth. Quite frankly, with all the feminine fury being generated between the two, Naruto didn't think Akira Moshi would find himself a quick death. If anything, he was going to be spending the next week being mentally tortured until his brain is turned to mush, via genjutsu. Currently Naruto was holding down the fort, while the rest of his team was out gathering information while incognito. The sun was setting and soon all the criminal activity would be coming out. Of course if shinobi were walking around then nothing would happen and the underground stayed just that, underground. It was the necessary need for disguise. As his eyes swept the streets below from his vantage point, he caught something. It was the target. The target, who was currently following a young girl who couldn't be more than 12 or 13 with a disgusting look of hunger. Naruto opened the window and jumped onto the roof and pressed a finger to his ear to initiate radio contact. As he silently jumped across rooftops he said into his earpiece, "This is tree. Do you read me, team? Over. This is Crimson, we copy. What is a tree? Over. Target has been spotted approximately 35 meters westward from safe house. Requesting permission to engage and apprehend and bring back to safe house. Over. Permission granted. Take precaution. We'll be there in approximate 5 minutes. Over." Naruto dropped into an alley and walked out into the street. He quickly made his way towards Moshi and tapped him on the shoulder from behind. "What do you want?" The man was never able to finish his sentence as his mind was quickly confounded by a powerful genjutsu that Naruto cast and quickly led into the alley that Naruto had come out of. Making sure that no one was watching, Naruto grabbed the man's shoulder and shined back to the safe house. Once there and safely out of the public's view, Naruto sent a vicious backhand to the Moshi's jaw to dispel the genjutsu. As he crashed to the floor, Moshi's cognitive abilities returned and he began to panic at the unfamiliar environment he was in. The last thing he remembered was getting familiar that young girl's routine. As he looked up and started to get to his feet, he saw a young man looking down at him. Watching the man dispassionately, Naruto said, "Ugly thing, aren't you?" Staring at Naruto incredulously, Moshi raged, "Who the foo?" Again, He was interrupted from asking Naruto's identity, except this time not by a genjutsu but by Naruto's foot making contact with his face. As he rolled over and hollered in momentary pain, Naruto felt that physical torture would take too long, and that his teammates would arrive before he finished. Why use Nova Dash? Naruto shut him up by slamming his foot down on Moshi's throat. As he coughed and spluttered, Naruto whispered the last thing Moshi would hear as a sane man with his mind intact. Kurenai entered the safe house a little worried for the safety of her pupil, even though she knew that the young genin was a very capable fighter based off their training spars. However, she was surprised to find Akira Moshi on the ground, bleeding and foaming from the mouth. Naruto was sitting on the window edge and staring out into the forest. What happened? Yakumo asked from behind her. Naruto looked over and a small frown was played on his lips. I found him and then I incapacitated him, Naruto offered with a shrug. She walked over to the Moshi, whose eyes were glazed over as if he weren't even in his own body. You cast a genjutsu on him? She asked. He nodded his head in confirming her suspicions. Yakumo walked over to Naruto and asked, what's he seeing? Or is it Saw? A cold smirk adorned his lips. Ogres. Several dozen ogres. Yikes. You had him beaten to death by ogres? The smirk grew into a small smile. His eyes, she noted, were so lost in ice that they seemed inhuman. Demon-like even. Beaten? He asked with cold laughter. No, raped. Everyone in the room went deathly quiet and a few shades paler. Yakumo gave a small squeal before backing up and standing next Sasuke, who looked disturbed. Although unknown to Kurenai, for different reasons than herself and Yakumo. Kurenai herself was a little disturbed. While she loathed men like Moshi and the atrocities they committed, she really didn't have the stomach for these kinds of things. It's one of the things that made no sense when taking into consideration Anko was her best friend. You used that, didn't you? Sasuke asked in a quiet voice. Naruto looked over to him with a single eyebrow raised and a slightly amused expression on his face. Yes. Kurenai looked between them, faintly worried that Naruto did something that he shouldn't have done. Is there something I should know? Naruto regarded her, still looking marginally amused. No need to worry, Kurenai-sensei. Sasuke just isn't too fond of the jutsu I used. Why is that? She asked, genuinely curious at Sasuke's discomfort. Because, Naruto said with his trademark cold smile. The last person to ever use that jutsu was Itachi. All the world is but a stage. Sasuke looks ready to re-kill. Naruto turned his head towards the direction of his Uchiha teammate and gave a small laugh. Sasuke indeed had all the telltale signs of annoyance plastered on his face, though Naruto could hardly blame him. He was being swarmed by nobles and various influential business owners. Currently Team 7 was on a mission which involved attending the coming-of-age party for the daughter of a prominent noble in the Fire Daimyo's court. Naruto, who was already on the invite list due to the honorary seat the Senju clan held in royal court, managed to secure 2 more invites. You have to remember that the Uchiha are very wealthy and hold significant say in military affairs, and Sasuke, being the next clan head, is at that age where alliances are cultivated in the political arena, he told Yakumo, who was on his arm as his date for the night. She was dressed in a stunning white kimono with blooming sakura tree branch patterns. Naruto, himself, was dressed in an elegant forest green kimono with the Senju clan emblem proudly displayed on his back in neon white. Well, how come they're not trying to do the same to you? I mean, you're the last Senju in Konoha. They should be all over you, she exclaimed. I'm a familiar face at these kinds of events. I have been going in and out of various political circles for the last 2 years, getting the Senju back into the spotlight. They already know where I stand on numerous issues, and it is common knowledge that I'm an often guest in the daimyo's private estates. People know better than to try to curry favor with me, so they all just want a piece of Sasuke's money? Aren't the nobles rich enough? The reason being is that there is no such thing as financial security for the nobles. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? Asked a very confused Yakumo. Past relations between daimyos and nobles weren't always so good. When the Senju and Uchiha approached the Fire Daimyo of then to create Konoha, he took advantage of it and stripped a great deal of power away from the various feudal lords. If the current nobles displease the daimyo, he can strip them of lands and all their money. Ergo, tying your family to a prominent shinobi clan with a grade of wealth is a sure way of ensuring financial security. I don't understand, Yakumo said sheepishly. Naruto simply gave her a reassuring smile. Not everyone has a head for politics and economics. The Uchiha are a prominent part of Konoha's military structure. The Fire Daimyo cannot interfere with them without significantly weakening his own power base. Oh, Yakumo said as she nodded her head in understanding. Wow, that's really complex thinking. Indeed. As they walked through the sea of people and greeted various people that Naruto had interacted with over his frequent visits to the fire court, Yakumo's hold tightened on his arm and she leaned in towards him. To the many observers it would have looked like a very intimate action, however, to a trained eye, it was a carefully concealed whisper. Even as she was pulling away from him, Naruto followed her line of sight to a rather young noble who was holding a polite conversation with a young lady as they took drinks. Naruto's eyes searched the room until they locked with Sasuke's. The look of annoyance immediately melted off his face when he saw Naruto tuck one of his bangs behind his ear and stroke his jaw with a single finger. It was a message read loud and clear: target sighted. moving in. As Naruto and Yakumo made their way past the young noble, he, predictably, called out to Naruto. Senju-sama. Immediately, Yakumo could feel the change in Naruto. His body began to move on edge and emanated a cold, smothering aura. People began to subconsciously move away from the young man as their minds recognized him for what he was, a predatory on the hunt. As Naruto turned towards the noble who called him, the young man gave an involuntary shudder as those frigid blue eyes appraised him. Lord Shinji, Naruto said in a cold, hard voice. Had I known you were here, I would have greeted you at an earlier time. My condolences for your recently passed father. Thank you, Senju-sama, the young man said with a bow. My family is honored by your kind words. After a moment's silence, Naruto spoke once again. You have, then, taken control of your father's estate, no? Ah, yes, sir, he said proudly. And I am proud to say that it is more profitable than ever. At these words, Naruto gave such a predatory smile that the young man visibly shivered and actually took a few steps back. Good for you then. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to introduce myself to that Uchiha upstart. Why yes. Have a good day, Senju-sama. Shinji gulped as he suddenly felt bad for the young Uchiha. However, what he failed to notice, as Naruto captivated his entire attention, was Yakumo slipping something into his drink as she walked away. 10 minutes later, a crowd of nobles, watching the interactions between the Senju and Uchiha clan heirs apprehensively, suddenly turned towards the direction of several screams. They found the young Lord Shinji on the floor, his face a rather amusing shade of purple. 3 days later, Naruto was sitting in a well-furnished living room sipping tea within the Uchiha compound. He was a common guest in the halls of the Uchiha, as strange as it was. He was probably the only Senju, since Hashirama, to be able to walk these halls without fear of being struck down by a kunai in the back. He knew from Madara's memories that the founding Hokage would often drop by uninvited and unannounced in the Uchiha territory with his big goofy smile, and somehow wind up staying for dinner despite being unwanted. He could also see the memories of when Hashirama's wife, Mito, would get upset at him for something stupid he did and kick him out of the house. Of course, within a few hours, Madara would have a drunken Hashirama banging on his door and wailing like a 6-year-old girl about the unfairness displayed by the general populace of the opposite sex. In all honesty, Naruto was beginning to think that Madara's defection from Konoha was not so much political in nature, and the man's desire for power, but rather him being fed up with Hashirama's childishness. Naruto attributed Konoha's survival in the earlier years to be Tobirama running interference on behalf of his older, politically inept brother. Don't get him wrong, Naruto greatly respected his great-grandfather. As a warrior he was without peer and legends spoken of with the same reverence as that of the sage of the 6 paths. However, Hashirama was an awful statesman. The Daimo Hokage was the real reason for Konoha's initial survival. A soft giggle broke him from his thoughts, and he looked up to see Mikoto covering her mouth with her sleeve. Her eyes were twinkling with mirth, and a small smile was painted across her lips. You're so cute when your face is lost in thought, she said with no small amount of mischief in her eyes. Naruto frowned. He considered himself many things. Cute was most assuredly not among them. Ah, don't pout, you're still my big strong Senju, she said as she made her way over to him and cuddled herself right next to him on the sofa. Naruto placed his tea back onto the table and wrapped his arms around Mikoto, drawing her into his side. She placed her head on his chest and snuggled deeper into his embrace with a sigh of content. Mikoto had found that Naruto had grown to have a fascination of some sort with her hair. He would run his hands through it and play with it as he was doing now. She felt his lips press down on the top of her head, and she closed her eyes and smiled. It frightened her somewhat, but she had grown to depend on the much younger man. She knew it was a dream, not something meant to last, but damn it, she wanted the dream over the reality of not having a man she could love in her life. Minato and Fugaku were both taken from her. When Naruto had dropped the bomb about his Uchiha heritage through Minato, she had cried herself hoarse that night. If only he had told her. Minato had been an Uchiha in secret, and not just any Uchiha, but the son of Madara himself. The clan would have accepted him with open arms, and there would have been nothing stopping her from marrying him. Yet fate had been so cruel. The clan would never allow her to marry an outsider. Not unless he was a shinobi of outstanding caliber, and Minato hadn't been named Hokage yet. No, her father had given her to Fugaku in just a few years after her eldest was born, the woman who her sister in all but blood had married the man she had loved since a child. Soon enough Sasuke was born and things were settling down as she grew comfortable in her new life. Nevertheless, tragedy had struck in the form of the nine-tailed demon. The fox came and took Minato and Kushina from her. Her 2 closest friends and the people who only her sons mattered more than, were gone. Yet fate had not had its way with her, no doubt punishment for some heinous sin from a past life. Fugaku, in his growing quest for more power, ever since he gained clan headship from their marriage, sought to overthrow the current Konoha and replace it with Uchiha rule. The elders had brought down their wrath upon him with a vengeance, and it was her unfortunate Itachi that had to carry that burden. Her poor baby, all out in the world by himself, having to live with the guilt of having his family's blood on his hands and never being able to return home due to being labeled a traitor and murderer, all for the sake of the village. How she hated Konoha at times. They took her friends and her son from them. Then, nearly 3 years ago, she finds out Kushina's son is alive and was being treated like trash by the same village his parents had sacrificed their lives for. The people of the village made her sick. They had grown arrogant in their cradle of power. Why did all those she cared about end up losing their lives for the village? Why couldn't her loved ones stay safe and away from harm? She couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else. What would she do if, 6 paths forbid, she lost her Sasuke? Or what if Naruto ended up dying on a mission somewhere, being targeted by other nations for his precious legacy? Now who's lost in their own little world? At the sound of his voice, so caring yet strong, teasing her, she couldn't take it anymore and began sobbing. Naruto for one was surprised, but he had become used to it. Mikoto was, despite her impressive capabilities, quite delicate and often needed comforting. As he got to know her, Naruto learned that she had serious abandonment issues, ruled by fears of being left all alone by her loved ones. He pulled her into his lap and cradled her against his chest as he rocked her. "Sure, I'm not going to go anywhere. There's no need to cry. I'll stay as long as you need me." "Sure." As she continued to cry into his chest, Naruto pressed his lips to her forehead and rubbed her back. Together they rocked back and forth until they both drifted off into sleep. It seems that war has begun. At the words of the Sandaime Hokage, the entire Shinobi Council had gone silent. All of them turned towards his seat at the head position, wide-eyed, and several of them thinking that they heard wrong. Naruto Shikaku looked at his Hokage and carefully asked, "By war you mean, Fang and Claw have declared war on one another?" It seems that respective rulers have little respect for each other. Hayashi was the first to ask a question. "Is there any chance of shinobi involvement? Have either governments approached us for any support?" The Hokage acknowledged Hayashi's questions with a nod before responding. "We have not been approached, but Jiraiya has reported that shinobi from Oto have been spotted within the countries in abundance." Interesting. The Shinobi Council turned towards the closest seat next to the Hokage and his advisors. "Naruto," the old man said with an eyebrow raised. "Something to share?" The young Senju sifted through a few papers in front of him before handing a document to Hamura to be passed to the Hokage and said, "Records show that the Earth Daimyo has been sending funds to the land of rice. However, where the funds go from there I have no clue. I'd hazard a guess to Oto, but there seems to be no interactions between the rice daimyo and his supposed shinobi village." Shibi spoke next in his usual monotone. "Are we to assume that perhaps IWA is constructing a scenario to start a war?" "Why, you ask?" "Because Oto would have to go through either fire or waterfall in order to send an army to either Claw or Fang." Inoichi provided his theory on the subject. "I don't think they would attempt to send their forces through fire. Oto doesn't have the resources to go head-to-head with one of the Great Five, especially since they would also have to march through AIM to get there, and the place has been in complete lockdown for years. But going through Taki would be the same as marching through fire, as we are currently allied with them," countered Sim. Shikaku hummed. "Do we even know for a fact that Oto will involve themselves in a war between two countries with only samurai forces? For that matter, what side will they choose in this troublesome conflict?" "Yes," said Sarutobi as he stroked his beard. "I will send a company of ANBU to the northern borders, and Shikaku, I want you to increase border patrols under the guise of martial exercises." "Hi, Hokage-sama." "Well, I assume that's all for today unless there is any." The Hokage never got to finish his sentence as an ANBU dropped next to him and offered him a scroll, bended on one knee. Frowning, he took the scroll and read through it. His eyes went wide and then narrowed as he looked at the clan heads assembled before him. They all sat straighter and sharply came to attention at the steel in the elderly Hokage's eyes. "Kiri has fallen into civil war. Yagura has had the Water Daimyo assassinated and declared himself military dictator of all of Water Country." The Shinobi Council looked on in shock. This was huge. It would easily disrupt the balance of power. With Misa embroiled in civil war, it would no longer be able to retain dominance of the oceans, which would mean lightning and fire could, and would, push for more island territory. "I will ask the Fire Daimyo to close all ports on the eastern coast for the time being. It seems the northern borders will need even more watching." With that, he snapped his fingers and a man appeared seemingly out of the shadows behind the Hokage. Clad in all black, even his mask was entirely bare, no eye holes or any other seemingly openings that allowed for respirations. "Commander, I want you to assign an entire platoon to patrol the borders of the land of hot water and rice. I want daily reports from hot water and biweekly from rice. Also prepare an escort team for me. I must speak with the Fire Daimyo personally and time is of the essence." "It will be done at once, Hokage-sama," the ANBU commander said sharply with a quick bow and melted into the ground. "Shikaku, I need you to send a squad to Takigakure and have them deliver our intelligence on the war between Claw and Fang. Meet me in my office once we leave and I'll prepare the scroll for you. Also have all active shinobi structured into teams and begin mandatory drills and war games. Don't let the news of war spread. I'm hoping to avoid actual conflict, but still, it's best to be prepared." "Yes, sir," the lazy Jounin commander saluted half-heartedly. "Hamura, Koharu, delegate and assign missions in my absence." "Of course," said Koharu while Hamura simply nodded. "Hayashi, I need you and your clan to patrol Konoha and apprehend any possible spies. At such a critical time we cannot afford to have cracks in our intelligence." I am authorizing the use of Byakugan within residential areas. The Hyuga lived to serve Konoha and her children, Hayashi said, with an unusual inflection of emotion in his voice. A shimmer of pride slipped into the Hokage's eyes before the steel returned. Naruto continued to monitor the finances of the nations. Big movements in cash tend to have shinobi following. Yes, sir. The Hokage got up and dismissed his council while being handed several documents by some of his ANBU. And will someone bring me Jiraiya? He shouted over his shoulder. Naruto brought himself into his office in the Senju compound and pushed his chakra just a small bit. A root ANBU dropped from the roof and kneeled before. Gather all the intel on Fang and Claw and bring them to me, also on all movements of Orochimaru from the last 3 months. With a flick of his wrist he dismissed the emotionless drone. Things have moved unexpectedly, he thought. Orochimaru's movements are troubling, and if IWA is truly involved, then I need to end this little quarrel before they can drag fire into it. The root operative returned, and with him were various thick folders. Leave me, he ordered, and began poring over the files of Orochimaru's latest ploys. After nearly 20 minutes of reading, he deduced what the traitor Sannin was up to. Chuckling to himself, Naruto thought, how clever of you, Orochimaru. You've had your little ninja turn Fang and Claw into a playground. At the meeting of the 2 daimyo you had both of them drugged with a rage-inducing chemical. Fang and Claw will turn to war, with Fang seeking aid from Taki while Claw turns to Kusa. All at the behest of your well-paid agents, no doubt. Eventually Kusa and Taki will declare war on each other, and Konoha will move to keep up the terms of their alliance with Taki. The Tsuchikage will no doubt take advantage and side with Kusa and declare war on Konoha. Of course you will sit back and watch until Konoha is vulnerable enough for you to make a full assault, silently congratulating the snake on a job well done on making such an effective plan and then letting it get ruined by having his agents being spotted. Naruto began to plot on how he could turn this to his advantage. Kusugakure had proven itself to be openly hostile towards Takigakure, as tensions had always run high between the two and barely tolerable of Konoha. He needed to find a way to weaken all negative factors while fire and its allies came out on top. Ideas began forming in Naruto's head, and a cold smile played across his lips as a sudden inspiration came to him. Flaring his chakra once again, Naruto spoke to the root operative that appeared from the shadows. Bring me whatever we have on Orochimaru's agents in both Fang and Claw, as well as whatever significant files we have on the 2 countries in the last 5 years. Oh, and send a team to Mizu to infiltrate Yugura's camp. Mind you, tell them to try and not get killed or, even worse, captured if they can help it. Yes, sir, came the monotone reply. In a large ornate throne room sat a man dressed in the most lavish robes that seemed to scream, "Look at me." Said man was absent-mindedly fanning himself with a small paper fan while some lord of a minor provenance groveled before him. The Fire Daimyo had played the game of politics since he was a 5-year-old child and named heir to the throne. Though he came off as the usual eccentric and easily excited noble, in truth, he was cunning and ruthless as the very shinobi he employed. For over 40 years he had ruled Fire Country, had seen it go through 2 world wars and still remained the most powerful nation on the continent. The other elemental nations couldn't even hold a candle to the achievements that his nation had made. One of the oldest dynasties in the world, the very first to have a shinobi village, and the only one to have never suffered defeat. He had seen it all, of course. Though he had to admit that a few years ago, his country had been on decline. His military force had taken a significant hit with the loss of the young and charismatic Hokage, the near annihilation of the Uchiha, and the assault by the force of nature that is the Kyuubi. There was also the world recession that gave rise to several smaller powers following the Third World War. However, things had taken a substantial turn in events in the last 3 years, and all due to a young man that brought him a secret that Sarutobi had the gall to keep from him. A young man that he, due as the perceptiveness he gained through years of being a statesman, saw appear in a ripple of space in the far corner of his throne room. More interested in what his young confidant had to say than the sniveling waste of space in front of him, he snapped his fan closed audibly. The minor noble that had been prattling on about his needs for funds from his treasury so that he could get rid of bandits that plagued his farmlands by hiring his shinobi. The noble had stopped jabbering when the daimyo snapped his fan shut. It was common knowledge that when the Fire Daimyo did that, then he was annoyed and wanted whoever was annoying him out of his presence, or downright executed. Luckily for him it was removal as the guards escorted him out. He then dismissed all his various pages and ministers so that he was left with only his ninja guardians. There were a few voices of protest from some of his ministers, but a sharp glare sent them running. "A surprise to see you, young Naruto." "Oh yes, a surprise indeed." The blonde-haired youth approached the throne from the shadows in his usual powerful, yet graceful gait and bowed at the waist when he arrived at the stairs leading to the imperial seat. "Greetings, Daimyo-sama. I hope I find you in good health?" The Fire Lord suppressed a chuckle. He never fully bowed onto his knees as was expected of all his subjects. No, Naruto himself had stated that if anyone were to ask for him to get on his knees, they better be the Almighty himself, or else he would, quote, introduce their face to my foot. "Oh yes. Excellent health, excellent indeed. What services can we render our young friend in our humble abode?" If he didn't know that the daimyo enjoyed playing his subjects like fools, Naruto would have snorted. "As if there's anything humble about having your own damn citadel. I've take it you've heard about recent affairs?" "Oh yes, yes indeed. We are well informed." I was making plans to end this annoyance but thought it would be best to consult with you before taking the burden of your lesser rivals. Ho ho ho, truly your guest has passed on some of its cunning to you, passed on indeed. Yes, we received tribute from Fang this year, and the imperial consort was quite pleased with silks gifted. We shall leave them be, but we will not look a horse in the mouth as our samurai. Oh no indeed, Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. Then shall Claw be the recipient of our attention? Oh yes, yes indeed. Our sister son was once meant to be betrothed to Claw's heir. Their marriage would give us access to river trade routes that would greatly benefit us and would grant them our protection. Yet they turn away from our generous offer and turn to third son of Tsuchi. An insult to us and our domain. Oh yes, an insult indeed. Naruto, who was beginning to see where this was going, nodded in understanding. I take it then that the girl is still unmarried to Earth Daimyo's son? Still young is she? Oh yes, young indeed. 3 years more are needed for the set date to pass. 3 more years the insult may continue. Oh yes indeed. Naruto pondered over the situation for a few minutes before unleashing a predatory smile at the Fire Daimyo. The ninja guardians watching suddenly felt uncomfortable and shifted just in case. However, the Fire Daimyo sat there with no concern. What if she were no longer the heir? What if she were to take the throne? Could Fang be convinced to call off the war? A minor frown appeared over the Fire Daimyo's lips as he thought about the hypothetical situation. The house of Fang is young but still proud. Oh yes, proud indeed. They would not war with a throne sat upon by a child. Oh no, no indeed. Naruto's smile got only bigger and, to the guardians, creepier. And what if Fire Country offered to mediate the peace between the two? Suddenly the Fire Daimyo's eyes lit up, and a wide smile played across his face. We would be able to host the talks in our halls and guide the treaty to our liking indeed. We may even convince a child ruler to fall under our guidance and bind her to us, bind her indeed. Then I assume I have your permission to act? The Fire Lord nodded his head and in a deep voice commanded, in our name, we order the Lord of Senju and Uzumaki to go forth for the betterment of the land of fire. Naruto nodded his head in acknowledgement. Then so be. The doors banged open and one of the Fire Court's minor officials came running, panting rather pathetically as well. Be swift in your explanation as to why we are disturbed in such a fashion, else we will have your head removed from your shoulders. Removed indeed. The official fell to his knees and placed his forehead on the ground, though whether from fear or exhaustion or a combination of both was indistinguishable. Your huff, Majesty, huff huff. The daimyo's eyes twitched in annoyance. Enough, remove this vermin from our presence. As the guards at the door came over and picked the man up by his arms, he yelled, Wait! Your Majesty! The Hokage is at the city gates. He will be arriving soon, fool! We knew already that Hiruzen approaches. Let him rot in a cell for a week, rot indeed, he commanded the last bit to the guards while pointing his fan at the official. The man was so shocked that he didn't even object as the guards dragged him out and shut the doors. The old man got here pretty quick. He only left from Konoha about an hour ago. Must have given his ANBU a workout if he arrived here in such a short time, said Naruto, who was standing upside on the vaulted ceiling. Not even bothering to crane his neck to look up at the young shinobi lord, the daimyo said, Hiruzen has always put efficiency as his priority during times of war. Oh yes, indeed. We will have much to discuss as the fall of our water equivalent shall present opportunities for our navy and expansion of territories. Opportunities indeed. Then I suppose I best hurry and take care of the Fangs/Claw annoyance. Oh yes, yes indeed, chuckled the Fire Daimyo. Oh yes, one last thing, Naruto, last thing indeed. We have ordered the closing of all ports as Hiruzen advised in his letter. As governor of Uzushio, you will have to sign off on those orders, sign off indeed. It shall be taken care of. With that, Naruto disappeared in a swirl of space. The Fire Daimyo chuckled once Naruto was completely gone. Such a dangerous child, oh yes, dangerous indeed. The ninja guardians could only nod their heads. The next morning, Kurenai was running her team through various drills. Orders had come down to spend time training extensively, and so far only the Jounin knew, but the political climate was ripe for war. She herself had lived through her childhood during the Third Shinobi World War and, from what she saw from her seniors, was not something anyone wanted to experience. Kakashi had been a few years older than her and fought alongside the fourth before he became Hokage, and was still haunted by whatever happened to him. He was one of the strongest shinobi in the village too. She looked at her team as they ran through formations and layered jutsu together. They had really grown on her the last few months. Yakumo was already like a younger sister to her, and Sasuke and Naruto had become like younger brothers. Overprotective younger brothers, she might add. She giggled at the memory of when Asuma had literally fled from the two after he tried hitting on her. Flashback. Kurenai was walking down the market street looking to buy some fresh fruit from some of the vendors. She always liked the organic produce from the small farms on the outskirts of the village. Naruto had explained to her how the forest surrounding Konoha had some form of chakra left over from the first Hokage, hence why the small local farms around the village walls grew the most delicious food. It amazed her how the first Hokage, even 50 years after he died, still found a way to help out his people. Now that, to her, was dedication. I guess there's a reason he coined the term Will of Fire. Hey there, Kurenai, a voice said behind her. Kurenai turned to see a tall dark-haired man with tan skin and a short beard. "Oh, hey Asuma. You shopping too?" "Yeah," said Asuma as he moved next to her. "I was out on a mission for 2 weeks with my brats, so I have nothing in my home that isn't spoiled." Kurenai frowned as he took out a cigarette and lit it. She promptly took it out of his hands, threw it to the ground and stomped on it. "Those things will kill you, and you shouldn't call your genin that. Not unless you coat your lungs with wind chakra to expel all the smoke," he said, pulling out another one. "Besides, I have a Nara and a Kimichi. The embodiments of lazy. Not to mention Ino is the single bossiest girl I've met." She simply huffed and crossed her arms, continuing with her shopping. She noticed Asuma was right behind her, and was walking close enough that their shoulders kept brushing. After a few minutes of silence and stall browsing, he said, "So Kurenai, I was wondering if later you'd lick." Asuma stopped mid-sentence, and indeed, it seemed as if the entire street froze. The reason being? A palpable murderous wave that seemed to wash over the market. Oddly enough, Kurenai seemed unaffected, yet she turned in curiosity, as Asuma had rapidly spun around. What she saw made her sigh. The entire street had parted in two as the Uchiha and Senju pair walked towards Asuma and her, both exuberating an aura of carefully controlled anger. No one said a word as the two made their way towards her. Both of them had their gazes locked on Asuma. Kurenai barely registered Yakumo trailing behind the two nervously and somewhat embarrassed. "Good afternoon, sensei," Sasuke greeted as they approached. She smiled at him because he was being friendlier than when they had initially formed as team. Of course, that smile quickly transformed into a frown when he and Naruto maneuvered themselves between her and Asuma. Feeling a tug on her sleeve made her look over to an apologetic-looking Yakumo. "Sorry, Kurenai-sensei," she quickly whispered. "We were heading out for lunch when we spotted you two. They left before I could stop them." Kurenai sighed, knowing what this was about. Naruto and Sasuke were extremely overprotective of her and Yakumo. A client had once made suggestive remarks towards her once, and in retaliation the two of them threatened the man in such horrific, albeit creative, ways that the man went back to the Hokage in tears and asked for a different team. Though she reprimanded them for it, she was secretly pleased. Her boys were perfect gentlemen without an ounce of perverseness. "Kurenai-sensei," Naruto began. "We were heading out to lunch to a restaurant that I bought that was voted 5 stars. Their takawasa is said to be superb, and I wanted your opinion on it, knowing that it is your favorite. My mother also invited you to a flower viewing party this evening. We obtained some particularly rare sake for this event," Sasuke finished. Of course, both of them hadn't looked at her for one word of what they said, instead opting to glare openly at Asuma, who was sweating bullets. Kurenai knew what they were doing. Naruto appealing to her favorite food and Sasuke to her love of strong and good sake, and Kurenai was ashamed to say it was working. She was embarrassed to admit it, but her two students spoiled her. In this case, however, they were attempting to destroy Asuma's self-confidence by throwing into his face who they were and what they were capable of. Sighing, once again, and closing her eyes, she placed a hand on each of their heads. "Boys, that's enough. Naruto, stop shamelessly throwing around your money, and Sasuke, there really is no need for your Sharingan to be out right now." In response, she got a perfectly synchronized HN. Kurenai forgot that these two were distantly related, Naruto having divulged that he had Uchiha ancestry to her. Returning her attention to Asuma, she smiled apologetically and pushed past her two genin. "Sorry, Asuma, my boys can be a little too overprotective. You were going to say something?" No, never mind, it was nothing," Asuma said while nervously scratching the back of his head. "I need to get going later." As Asuma disappeared in a puff, she turned to glare at the two boys, who shamelessly gave her another HN. Sighing again, she said, "You said Takawasa?" At Naruto's nod, she replied, "All right, let's go." As Naruto and Sasuke led off, Kurenai looped her arm through Yakumo's, who said, "Boys." Kurenai snorted at this, in full agreement. "Although you have to admit it was rather cute." "It was, wasn't it?" smiled Kurenai. Both Kurenai and Yakumo broke into giggles when they heard a pair of indignant HN. Flashback end. Kurenai smiled at her team as they walked towards her. Noticing that Naruto hadn't been all there during the session, asked whether he was all right or not. "I'm fine, Kurenai-sensei. Didn't sleep much last night. Was busy doing stuff." Kurenai was about to say something when Naruto turned his head towards the trees on the border of the Train 9 ground and said, "Hey cat." Suddenly a purple-haired ANBU wearing a cat-themed mask appeared beside Naruto. "Hey there, Naruto-chan," she said, and ruffled his hair, which caused him to scowl. The other three were surprised by the ANBU's sudden appearance. Kurenai more so because she knew who this ANBU was. Yugao Yuzuki, codenamed Cat, was a very good friend of hers. "You know Naruto?" she questioned with a surprised face. "Yeah," her voice drifted from behind the mask. "Me and Naruto-chan go way back. Anyways, I was about to leave on a mission myself with my squad when I was asked to give you guys a mission. You're to head over to Wave Country and provide backup to Kakashi and Team 7. Apparently a routine C rank ended up being booted to the high end of A rank, and they're sending another Genin team to back them up," Kurenai asked incredulously. "Due to extenuating circumstances, many of our elite teams have been deployed to the borders." "Right, I forgot. Anyways, here are the mission details," she said while taking a scroll from the pouch on her belt. "Well, later guys. Good luck, Naruto-chan," she said while disappearing, but not before ruffling Naruto's hair one more time. Turning to her team, Kurenai said, "You have 1 hour to meet me in front of the main gates. Pack well, this is a long trip." Dismissed. While sealing away all the gear needed for a long trip and finding something more comfortable to wear into battle instead of his Senju yukata, Naruto also pored over the files Danzo had on Wave. Wave's current economic situation would make it an easy addition to the Fire Country, not to mention a good chance to earn a lot of cash that no one could trace. He smiled to himself as walked over to the weapons wall and pulled off the gun by Fire and Ice Part 1. Mikoto. The Uchiha matron turned around to see her blonde lover dressed for battle. A sad smile adorned her lips. "I suppose you're also heading out then?" He nodded. "I'm going to assume that Sasuke already told you that we're going to gone for a while?" Nodding her head, she bit her lip and silently walked over to him. Not meeting his gaze, she brought her hands up to his chest and said, "He said that it's an A-rank mission for a team that desperately needs backup. A long-term mission where you'll be gone for a month or more so." Frowning, Naruto cupped her chin with one hand and tilted her head up so that he could look her in the eyes. His frown deepened when he saw that she had unshed tears in her eyes. However, the contact between soft onyx and hard ice was all it took for those tears to spill forth. As she stood there, soundlessly crying, he simply stood there looking down at her emotionlessly. He appeared to be searching for something in her eyes. Having, apparently, found what he was looking for, his frown retracted back into his customary stoic visage. "Stop that," he ordered as his other hand came up and wiped away her tears with his thumb. "If I have said it once, I have said it 1,000 times. Your crying in my presence is a personal insult." She let out a small laugh as she moved forward, wrapping her arms around him and pressing the side of her face into his chest. After a few moments she said, "Promise me. I'll come back, we both will." Taking a step back, she looked at him in the eye and moved forward. Naruto's hands enclosed her slim waist as their lips met. After a chaste moment they pulled back in each other's gaze. Lingering for a moment they met again in a slow, searing kiss that drowned the world around them. Once more they pulled apart and Mikoto let out a sigh of discontent. His hands moving up to her shoulders, she closed her eyes in bliss as his lips brushed her forehead. She kept her eyes close, even as she had him burst into his shunshin of 1,000 black butterflies. Breathing quietly for a minute, she clutched her hands together over her heart as she opened her eyes and saw the faint trail of purple dust drift about her. Kurenai looked at her two genin that had already assembled in front of Konoha's massive gates. Yakumo looked the same as ever, although there was the glint of determination found in her eyes whenever the team left the village. Sasuke had changed out of his traditional Uchiha yukata. He now sported an Uchiha-style dark blue, long-sleeved shirt, as well as wearing loose-fitting black pants. She looked around for Naruto but couldn't find nor sense him. "We still have 5 minutes before departure," she thought as she glanced at the small watch on the inside of her wrist. After a minute of waiting, a swarm of black butterflies swooped down and began to congregate on one spot. The butterflies soon took the shape of a human, which quickly revealed itself to be Naruto. As he stepped forward, Kurenai couldn't help but go wide-eyed. Sure, she had seen his incredible entrance before, but now the apparel he was now garbed in was sure to turn more than a few heads for those well-versed in history. Completely regaled in black, Naruto had on a long-sleeved V-neck shirt, and his hands were covered in thick gloves. Cargo pants adorned his legs and combat boots for foot apparel. The only skin Naruto was showing was the cream of his neck and his face. His hair, normally tied loosely and hung over his shoulder, was now freely and wildly cascading down his back. A katana was attached to each side of his hip, and most striking of all, was the impressive war fan strapped onto his back. Uchiha indeed, Kurenai concluded. If those black streaks in his hair were more dominant, then he'd look like a young Madara. "Ready?" she asked with her arms folded across her chest. He nodded in affirmation as he walked past her to stand with his teammates, who were staring at him. One in scrutiny, the other with blushing cheeks. "Everyone ready to deploy?" At 3 affirmatives she walked over to Izumo and Kotetsu, who were still looking at Naruto with awe. Kurenai had to suppress a chuckle that threatened to escape her at the sight of Konoha's most well-known chunin. Team 8 deploying to provide backup to Team 7, she announced as she handed them their mission scroll. Doing a quick one-over of it, they handed it back to her and Izumo said, "Everything checks out. Good luck out there." With that, all 4 of Team 8 disappeared in a blur, leaving the 2 gate guards to their wonders. "Man, I tell you, that kid gets more and more impressive every day," said Kotetsu. "I know," exclaimed Izumo. "Did you see that shunshin? I mean, I thought Itachi was all cool with his ravens, but damn." 7 hours later. Borders of Fire and Wave. All 4 of Team 8 had worked simultaneously to weave together a powerful genjutsu that would keep their identities as shinobi hidden as they boarded the passage to the island nation. Naruto quickly swept his gaze over the people working the docks, and he couldn't help but notice that most of the workers seemed a little too unruly looking to be working the docks. He swiftly dismissed the idea that these were pirates, and concluded that they were hired thugs to keep watch and detain anyone that might disrupt Gato's business. Yes, Naruto knew what Gato was doing in Wave with the weight of his shipping empire. In fact, the tiny businessman had been an annoyance to Naruto for well over 2 years, bordering on 3. However, He was minor annoyance, and one that did not warrant his personal attention. Yet, now that he had been placed into Naruto's path, Naruto was hardly one to give up an opportunity. In fact, Gato attempting to take over Wave was impressively advantageous to Naruto and his plans. There would much benefit to reap if he went about this the right way. So, came Yakumo's voice over his shoulder. What can you tell me about Wave? Naruto had been staring out at sea while he was immersed from his thoughts, so he turned around to glance at Yakumo. Hearing her question, Sasuke and Kurenai ceased whatever conversation they were having and walked over to them. Leaning up against the railing of the ship, Naruto crossed his arms and gathered his thoughts. Well, he began. It's a minor island country with no military force aside from the local feudal lord's private force. However, even that is quite insignificant. So no shinobi, she questioned. None. They normally turn to us because of the proximity as well as the historical connection between the two nations. Their main source of income is commercial fishing as well as serving as the major port hub between the southern countries and the continent. Historical connections? Yes, not many are aware of the fact, but Wave used to be part of the Fire Country. Kurenai blinked in surprise before asking, really? What happened to make them leave? Looking over to Yakumo, Naruto said, remember how I said the Fire Daimyo then used the threat of the soon-to-be-formed Leaf Village to make all the local feudal lords give up their armies and vast amount of land to solidify his rule? At Yakumo's quick yup, he looked back at Kurenai and said, well, instead of swearing fealty, the feudal lord of what is now Wave offered to pay a massive tribute in return for independence. Must have been a lot of gold to buy off a power-hungry man like a daimyo, Sasuke snorted. Naruto nodded. Yes, approximately 83 pounds of gold, several furs of rare animals, numerous shiny things that make noble sequel like children, and 2 of his daughters. He gave his own daughters away. Yakumo looked quite incredulous as well as furious, and while Kurenai showed no outward sign of anger, there was quite the raging inferno in her crimson eyes. Ignoring the female fury, Naruto said, yes, it's a common practice in upper society. The Fire Lord took one as a concubine and gave the other to his brother, if I remember correctly. That's horrible. What kind of people just go around trading and handing out women like that? Naruto smirked to himself. Well, you'll be finding out in a few days, Yakumo. Cutting the little tirade of feminine wrath short, Sasuke said, so should we expect any form of negative reactions from the local authorities? Not likely, Naruto responded by shaking his head. We've had no official dealings with their government since the breakaway. Not for the lack of trying though, Naruto thought irritably. About 20 years ago, it was discovered that Wave had large deposits of a titanium alloy underneath it. The alloy is very useful in military applications but damn too expensive to craft synthetically, making it an ineffectual resource. Ergo, access to a naturally formed source would exponentially change weaponry and armor rating within the Fire Country. Hence the reason they've been trying to get the country under their control. Nevertheless, before this discovery was made, Wave made several trade agreements with Wind Country, who became allied with Fire during the Third Shinobi World War. Annexing Wave would trigger an international incident, and Fire, although boasting huge strength, was still not fully recovered from the Fox's assault 14 years ago. No, in order for them to obtain that, oh so very, useful alloy, Naruto would have to play games in the shadows. Looking back out to sea, he gazed upon the landmass that would soon be his prize. The door opened to reveal a shaggy-haired Kiba Inuzuka. He didn't look surprised at seeing Kurenai and her team, which told her that Hinata must have told him it was them using her Byakugan. So they sent you guys, huh? Couldn't they have sent someone better? He asked arrogantly. This got him a sharp slap to the back of the head. I apologize for his behavior, Kurenai-sensei. Please do come in. Kurenai giggled and said, it's no problem, Hinata. How are you? Are any of you injured? I am well, as are the others, but Kakashi-sensei is suffering from chakra exhaustion, said the young Hyuga girl. As her team maneuvered themselves into the house, Kurenai took a look at her one-time student. Hinata had grown into a beautiful young woman with curves and looks that any female would kill for and have every man turn his head. Garbed in the traditional Hyuga battlewear, and with her long lavender hair tied in a high ponytail save for her bangs, she looked every bit the fierce kunoichi her clan produced. Once a timid and shy girl, with Kurenai's tutelage and support, she grew into her own as fine young lady. From what Kurenai learned, Hinata's mother had also been a gentle and kind soul. Even if she commanded just as much fear as she did love and respect in the Hyuga household. It seemed that those traits had been passed down to her daughter. It seemed everyone liked the new Hinata that had finally come out of her shell. Everyone except Hayashi. The clan head, despite his cold and ruthless demeanor, preferred his sweet and quiet daughter. It was speculated, privately of course, that the Hyuga head was terrified of his now fierce daughter and actually went out of his way to avoid her. Kurenai saw that Hinata was now openly glaring at Sasuke, who was heatedly glaring in return. Kurenai sighed at this. The rivalry between the Uchiha and Hyuga was as legendary between the Uchiha and the Senju. The two sides had argued about which clan held the superior dojutsu for years. Eventually both broke off the glare, one with an HN, the other with an humph. Hinata's scowl from her glare with Sasuke immediately melted into a warm smile when she saw Naruto standing off in the corner watching everyone and their movements. Walking towards him with a sway to her hips, she stopped just a few feet short of him and gave a small bow with her hands clasped together. "It's good to see you, Naruto-kun. I hope you've been well," she said with a seductive smile. Kurenai had to work really hard in order to suppress her laughter as she saw the young Senju's eyes twitch. Very few people could get away with adding the kun suffix to his name without being hit with the young man's smothering aura and anger. Even she could only get away with it when they were in private. Now that she thought on it, not only had Yugao nicknamed him, but he had allowed her to touch him. As far as she knew, almost none could get within 2 feet of him without being subjugated to his killing intent and possible violence. No doubt the only reason Hinata was getting away with calling him so intimately was because her position as the Hyuga heir. That was another thing she could never understand. Why, in the name of the 6 paths, would Hinata fall for Naruto? Sure, the boy was drop-dead gorgeous, but Hinata was not one to follow such fangirl tendencies. When Hinata had first informed her of her crush on Naruto, she became instinctively nervous. While not fair to Naruto, Kurenai didn't want anything putting Hinata in harm's way. So she went out to observe the boy for a few days. She discovered many things about him. 1. He was damn near impossible to find. 2. He was ice cold to the point where she couldn't imagine any little girl having a crush on him. 3. When angered, he would release a murderous aura so thick and oppressive that civilians would drop to their knees or even fall unconscious. The embarrassing part of the story is when Anbu had brought her in for questioning to discern her reasons for following the young boy around. It even warranted a trip to the Hokage's office. Still, she gave Naruto a fair chance when he was assigned to her, and she found him to be an elegant and refined young man who was simply misunderstood. However, he was still cold as death. "I was wondering if one of you could take me to see Kakashi," she said, breaking out of her reverie. "He's still out of it," answered Kiba, who was now sitting down at the kitchen table with his arms behind his head. Kurenai smiled at him. "That's fine. I just want to check on him." "I will take you to him then," said a voice behind her that, had it not been for years of training, nearly made her jump. Kurenai was quite surprised to see the Apprehending member of the team behind her. His hands were tucked away into his oversized jacket, his hood pulled up and shades covered his eyes. All in all, not someone Kurenai would want to meet by herself, or in the dead of night. "Oh, Apprehending-san, isn't it? I didn't see you there," she trailed off lamely. Turning around and walking away, he muttered something that no one except Kiba heard, who just shook his head at his friend's predicament. Calling from behind her, Naruto said, "I'm going to scout the area." "Okay, but be careful, Naruto." Naruto wove a genjutsu about himself to make himself invisible to townsfolk as he walked about, and noticed the deplorable state of the country. It seemed that Gato had milked the country for all it's worth. Well, not all of it. At least he hoped not, else it would be a huge blow to the Fire Country in terms of potential weapons crafting. Naruto looked about and saw the misery etched onto the faces of all the citizens as they walked around the town. Small merchant stalls had the lowest quality looking goods, several shops were boarded up, and restaurants were completely closed. Not even 4 years ago this town was one of the wealthiest in the world. Now look at its deplorable condition. As he saw young children, orphans by the looks of their rags for clothes, sift through garbage, a small part of him stirred. Right before he mercilessly crushed it, Tsunami was actually quite happy to find the new company at her home. The village from where the earlier shinobi had come from had sent backup. She had become quite worried when they had showed up with their unconscious teacher and her father in row. Now they finally had more help, and surely 8 shinobi would be able to save this country from Gato's dirty grip. Speaking of the new arrivals, Tsunami was actually quite surprised by their appearance. When she had come down from her shower, she found 3 very attractive and good-looking human beings in her kitchen. The girl, Yakumo was her name. She had the features of a porcelain doll, and her hair was such a thick and lush brown. Then there was the boy. Tsunami actually had to hide her blush upon seeing him. His dark locks clashing terrifically with his pale complexion. Not to mention his hard gaze held 2 perfect black diamonds that shone with dignity and pride. Their sensei was the one that had shocked her the most. She was a woman only a couple years younger than her, but looked like some divine art come to life. Cream white skin, with dark, luscious chocolate-colored hair that had a beautiful wave to it. Her figure, like that of one seen in fashion magazines. Her long legs accentuating her already lavish curves, and of course her eyes. Her dazzling ruby red eyes. Tsunami hadn't thought about looking good since her husband had been killed, but this woman shattered all her female pride. Not since she was a young girl did she feel jealousy over another woman's looks. Her gaze then trailed over to the young woman who came with the first team. Hinata, as she had introduced herself. She herself was incredibly beautiful, with her regal looks and mannerisms. Looking at the 4 of them as they talked with their colleagues, she wondered if part of being a shinobi was to make the rest of the world jealous. That Kiba boy also had a rugged handsomeness to him, and as for Shino, well, she was sure underneath all those layers there was something pleasant to look at. Kiba then angled head so that his head was in the air and took a whiff. "Hey Kurenai-sensei, Naruto's back." This seemed to catch the others' attention. Specifically Hinata's. Tsunami noticed. In fact, she could see tinges of pink on the young lavender-haired girl's cheeks. Good. Maybe he found something useful out. Tsunami had to admit, she was curious as to what the 4th member of the recent arrivals looked like. Was he as attractive as the other 2? Suddenly the door was gently pried open and Tsunami had to grasp the kitchen counter to keep herself steady. In walked the single most beautiful human she had ever seen. She stopped breathing as she was too captivated by the newcomer's appearance. His hair was the perfect shade of pale gold with streaks of jet black visible at the roots. His facial features were flawlessly angelic and soft yet honed with edges. He was tall, just an inch or two shy of the Kurenai woman herself, and he had broad shoulders. His shirt fit him tightly, giving shape to an obviously chiseled chest below. The V of his shirt giving her a perfect view of his ivory-colored neck, and as her gaze lowered to his collarbones she went a furious red as images assaulted her mind. Tsunami had to look away as she felt her heart pulsating within her chest as well as heard her blood feverishly running through her ears. She briefly glanced up and saw his gait. So elegant, so perfectly symmetrical. She couldn't look away from his slim waist as his hips moved in sync with his stride, how the fabric of his shirt on his back rippled with his muscles. There was something hypnotic in his movements. Something magical. Yes, that was it. Tsunami was sure that he was some dark enchanter, some sorcerer wielding ancient magic, compelling heat into her form. Did you find anything? Tsunami had to think for a moment. That was their teacher's voice. Kurenai. No. I am afraid not. Merciful heavens. That's his voice? Tsunami was now sure that this Naruto was not human. His voice held a melody in its own. It was deep but still detained a boyish affection. Ah yes, said Kurenai. Naruto, this is Tsunami. The daughter of the client whose house we're in. Her heart stopped and her breath caught in her lungs when he turned to look at her, and their eyes locked with each other. Beautiful. His eyes, dear heavens, his eyes. She was staring into two eternal pools of sapphire. They held no emotion yet shone with power and elegance. She could literally feel herself being pulled into those twin fields of ice and majesty. She was sure that some long-hidden truths of the world were hidden away within those shimmering jewels. Are you well? Realizing that she had been staring, Tsunami went crimson in the face. Why yes, I'm fine. Oh. Yes, I'm Tsunami. Thank you for your help, she said with a bow to quickly hide her embarrassment. Hand held across his abdomen, Naruto gave a small bow of his own at the waist and said, Naruto. Of the Senju. Be pleased to meet you and Naruto-san. He then gave her a charming little smile that had her gripping the counter with both hands now and the other females in the room blushing furiously. Kurenai shook her head at the sight before her. She somehow knew something like this would happen. Naruto was the single most attractive man she knew. In fact, he outclassed several females within the village. Something her female pride found difficult to accept but she knew to be true. Of course it didn't help that he was fully aware of how handsome he was and took full advantage of it. On one mission, about a month ago, her team was assigned the elimination of a rogue Kiri Kunoichi that had been sighted in Fire Country. They had found her in a town and before they could formulate a plan of elimination, Naruto simply walked up to her with a disarming smile. The rogue Nin was so red that it made little difference when Naruto slashed her throat out even as she was captivated by his angelic appearance. Yeah, that about sums up Naruto, Kurenai thought. A heartless angel. Clearing her throat, she obtained everyone's attention and looked at Team 7. So what's the situation here? It was Kiba who answered. Scratching his head he said, well, it was supposed to be a routine escort mission for that guy, Tazuna, over there. They all turned around to see an elderly man with a bottle in his hand, clearly stumbling down the stairs. Hick! Great, so they send a woman and more kids to help. I'm dead. Father, Tsunami exclaimed indignantly. What? Look at Tazuna never got to finish his sentence as a kunai blurred past him, cutting his cheek and embedding itself in the wall with a dull thud. Kurenai whirled around to see Sasuke with an outstretched arm. Sasuke, yo, you damn brat. What the hell are you thinking? Tazuna roared. Don't misunderstand, Sasuke said coldly, folding his arms and leaning up against the wall. We were sent for combat support. Not babysitting. Step out of line with us, and I'll make sure the next blade will be in the back of your head. Tazuna, now bleeding from his cheek rather profusely, spluttered out, You can't do that. I'm the client. Of course we can, Yakumo said cheerfully. We're Team 8. Assassination and infiltration specialists. Killing is what we do best. What? Tazuna said while nervously glancing back and forth between the members of Team 8. Team 7, on the other hand, was looking at their peers warily with a hint of admiration. Hand out more intel on us, why don't you? Sasuke muttered. Oops, hee. Sorry, Yakumo said while wearing a sheepish expression. Kurenai couldn't help but sigh in exasperation. Assassins, as a rule, don't interact with clients. Instead, they go through a middleman or in their case, the village. Her team had no experience on how to properly handle clients. Continue with your briefing, Naruto said, his strong voice cutting through the tension. Kiba looked around amusedly after Naruto had addressed him. Kurenai was glaring at Yakumo who was shamefacedly looking away and at Sasuke who was pointedly ignoring her. Shino was his usual stoic self, and Hinata had returned her full attention to Naruto as soon as he spoke. Tsunami was cleaning her father's cheek from the blood of Sasuke's inflicted wound while tentatively stealing glances at Naruto. Tazuna himself was caught between glaring at Sasuke and shaking in fear. Shrugging his shoulders, he said, Sure. Now let's see right. We left around noon and took the south road to Wave. moved at a snail's pace even by civilian standards because of his drunk ass. Kiba pointed at Tsunami and shot him a look that dared him to argue, but Tsunami would rather not take any chances with Team 8 in the room. About halfway there, we were ambushed by Kiri missing Nin. What were they called? He turned to Shino and asked, the Demon Brothers, right? Shino simply nodded in affirmation. Yes, so, Kakashi made it look like they managed to take him out with a simple substitution, but we saw through it easily enough. Hinata and I took out one each, while Shino hung back and protected the old guy's ass. Kakashi came back, congratulated us, and then interrogated the two weaklings that tried to jump us. And Kurenai asked with an eyebrow raised. Turns out the old drunk is wanted dead by some rich asshole named Gata. Gato, corrected Shino. Yeah, him. Well, anyways, this Gato guy got wave under his thumb, and he's fucking up everything. So the old man builds a bridge and finishes it to break Gato's hold on their economy. Team 8's gazes turned to Tsunami. You lied to the village missions department. It was statement on Kurenai's part, not a question. Please, Tsunami begged. You have to understand. Our people are dying. The people of Wave need help. Tsunami spoke in an emotion-riddled voice. Please, families are being broken up. Women are being forced into brothels. Children into slavery. Gato and his men are doing inhuman things. Still, Kurenai sighed. Had you spoken the truth, the village would have easily set up a payment plan. Now, if the Hokage or his council found out about this, well, Wave could be hit with some major fines that would only further your country in debt and ruin your credit lining with other nations. Tsunami looked horrified at the revelation. Too little too late for that, Sasuke snorted. Kurenai looked confused at first before realization hit her, and she groaned. What? What is it? Tsunami cried out, desperate for anything concerning his country. Naruto, she said as if that explained everything. Tsunami looked over to the quiet teen, truly getting a good look at him for the first time. Tsunami had to admit he was shocked he hadn't taken notice of the striking young man earlier. However, his wonder was quickly overtaken by his frantic worry. What about him? What does he have anything to do with this? Sasuke looked at the man and sneered at him and said coldly, Naruto is a member of Konoha's Shinobi Council as the head of the Senju clan. Did I also mention he's the one who deals with military finance under the Hokage? That includes mission payments and fines levied for misconduct and deceit. Tsunami looked at the young Senju as if he heralded the apocalypse. Even Tsunami looked somewhat perturbed and disturbed at this information. Rushing to his knees in front of the Senju lord, Tsunami began to beg. Please, please. Spare our nation. We have next to nothing left because of Gato. Don't take away any chance of recovery from us. Everyone went quiet as the stoic shinobi stared down impassively at the man groveling beneath him with tears in his eyes. Moment after moment passed as Naruto remained silent, seemingly content with ignoring Tsuna's sobbing. Kiba, continue, he said without any affliction in his voice. A shocked-looking Tsunami grabbed the cloth of Naruto's pants and exclaimed, Please!